Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Shadow and Sun Show, and welcome back to another Saturday night sci-fi shadow chat. Tonight, we are going to offer up some words of encouragement for all those new and budding game masters out there. With everything that's gone on this month, I'm certain there are going to be a lot of people looking at their DMGs and their favorite role-playing game books with eyes on taking controls, sitting in the old driver's seat on the other side of the DM screen. And I thought this would be a great opportunity, especially since Omen and myself and his Bo's friend Kevin, and of course Bo at the helm of a really fun game of GURPS last night. I thought this would be the perfect opportunity because he was kind of second guessing himself a little last night, and am I right, Omen? He had it completely under control, right?
Well, to be fair, I talked to him a little bit, but he did it. He did a very good job. I think that the problem that everyone has is you don't know on how you're doing until after the session when you can get some feedback. And it's for all the people that are nervous out there, and I know he was, and he didn't feel like he was as prepared as he wanted to be. The best thing you can do is just do it. Do it, and then worry about the other stuff once you're ready for that.
Speak of the devil, there he is right there.
Yeah.
And Gamers Dan is here. How's it going, everybody in the chat? Oh, Fat Gamer's here too. And I see Connell's hanging out, and Sean Cherry. Long time no see for those of you who it's been a while. I don't know about you guys, but it's been a little bit of a month, wouldn't you say?
For role playing, yeah. Well, actually, it's funny because you think things would slow down after the year, but nope, they speed up. So for January.
Yeah. It didn't really bug me a lot. What bugged me was all all my favorite content creators out there, just like a dog with a bone, just wouldn't let go of the topic. And I was just hoping for, some good old fashioned chit chat about anything but that after about the first week of it. I was on a couple of shows, I'm not going to lie, probably more than half a dozen shows. A couple I didn't realize what I was getting myself into when I joined our good friend DM Bloodworth. He invited me to a show, and I thought we were going to talk about the upcoming game, and we spent 2 hours going on about the thing, and then hanging out with the folks over at the Red Room. Great channel if you haven't checked those guys out. I really like their style. It's really nice to see. I'm assuming they're husband and wife or boyfriend and girlfriend. I really didn't pry, but they seem like such a nice couple. Doing that thing, the whole role playing and writing, and so if you haven't checked out their channel, check it out. Same with Bo, and of course the Gamers Den. Talk about a polished, incredible channel. I don't know if you guys have seen the Gamers Den. He's got a really nice channel. And of course, hello to our absolute wonderful friend James L., the absolute king of generosity. This guy is just aces in our book. And Dizzy Rogue, how you doing? Nice to see you.
You got a whole entourage coming out.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool people here. I'm flattered and grateful for everybody taking time out of your busy schedules of weekend, bliss, coming to hang out with us. Kevin, it's been a while. How you doing, man? I know you've been busy writing up a storm.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I've been doing some writing, but I'm still dealing with a legal lawsuit, but it sounds like it's about to be settled. So I'll be able to get back to doing more writing and finishing up and getting more into settings design and stuff. And so yeah, it's been going pretty well.
You want to tell us a little bit about what you're writing? Because
sure.
You got some of the greatest people in the I'm not going to use the C word, but in our extended family and friends
in
out
our
here.
in
Yeah,
our
yeah,
group of movers and shakers. So I'm working
yeah,
on
right.
I'm working on a well I I'm kind of calling it like a RPG operating system. So it's like a very high level, like what are the ideas about the parts of a game that need to be outlined to be an RPG and to be able to make it work. And from that kind of framework, then you can write settings, and the settings are actually I mean, they're actually the games, because it's like maybe the systems are little bit different from each other. Maybe they call things different things because of whatever genre they're in or that kind of thing. But it all boils down to, here are the kind of like mechanics behind the scenes that basically are all compatible. Um, and it's really, like, from what I understand, the system is shaking out to be a good deal like Traveler, but there are some differences, and it takes some systems from other role playing. What would I call it? Well, I mean, there are other role playing systems, but basically looking at games mechanics from story games and more OSR kind of games, and kind of taking the best of everything. And I'm hoping to put it in a frame, or put the rules into basically just docs online, to where they're open and there isn't any problems with the stuff that we're not going to talk about, because everybody's been talking about it for like a month. But yeah, really, I just wanted to write something that I felt like worked a little bit better mechanically than some of the kind of basic OSR ideas, and some bring some of those ideas of dealing with like abstract resources and those kind of things, trying to make it to where you don't have to be an accountant to enjoy the game, which, our buddy Gary definitely was, and I'm sure that he definitely enjoyed some of that stuff. But yeah, it's a big project. But really, I think this year I'm going to be producing. I'm going to start at the settings level. So I want to give a decent setting in different genres, some different IPs, and have some generic stuff that people can just play the game if they want to and make their own stuff, but also like have uh, what is it? Materials available, and start looking at virtual tabletops and things to be able to um, make content for, because content is really what you could sell. It's not the rules. Let's stop doing that.
Yeah.
Sorry, that
Uh,
was a long thing, but yeah, that's what it
no,
is.
no, no. You probably haven't heard, but my son and I are working on a basically what's probably going to be a 10-part, maybe even more, just world books, small little, possibly in a really old school sort of digest format like the original D&D
Hmm.
books, 10 separate worlds with unique settings that will be 50% fantasy, 50% sci-fi, with an overarching connection. So you, especially if you're like playing a game like Traveler, where you have a reason to go from one to the other to the other to the
Hmm.
other, to basically solve something of a mystery or an adventure or treasure hunt or something like that, that'll work, both fantasy and science fiction. And hopefully we're gonna find like we've scrounged up a couple of people to help us with art, but I want to kind of write each one with like somebody I'm going to call famous out here in our circle of friends, like, you know me and somebody, me and somebody, me and somebody for each one, so that I can work with somebody on each little project. Nothing major. Probably less than 50 pages. When you consider the artwork, but 25 and 25, just, system agnostic, just really old school, even to the point of the way it's printed and things like that, maybe saddle stitched, kind of cheap, but just to, get it out there
Hmm.
and get, people, used to the idea of just, coming up with new worlds. That's for me, especially Rick will attest to this, being a traveler player, going to the new worlds, and exploring them, even if you don't roll a single combat die, being able to like really get kind of, that feeling of being there, somewhere completely different. When you do like fantasy worlds, it's like they're all just slight variations of each other,
Right.
and I even with when I do the D&D worlds, I want to really make them like almost like what was it called? Oh, geez. Uh, the planescape thing, but instead of it being, a big long dimension, maybe there's a fire world or a lava world or, an ice world. Just as a matter of fact, ice world is the very first one.
Yeah.
Spoiler, but, just getting, something that's just all about the place and the people there and not the mechanics. If I do any mechanics at all, it's going to be in simple percentages, so that you can, if you want to change it to d6s or whatever, you can do the math yourself, and
So,
just
I'm just going to say it's probably going to be very similar to the old Forgotten Realms setting, where they'd have the map inside. If you remember that, you'd have the map inside, and you open them up, and it'd tell you about whatever region it was over there. Very similar. Because it just reminds me of that, they'd have it stapled in the middle, and you'd go down to. That's what I was thinking. I said, "Oh yeah, those
I
those are
really like
great."
that idea. I'm feeling that with putting the map in the very center, so it always folds open, to the map. I'm trying. I'm toying with using the hex pattern, traveler sort of world map, where it's all hexed out, but at the same time, I kind of want to have like an old timey version of a fantasy kind of map, because in a fantasy situation, they wouldn't have hexes and they would just have,
You-
vague, like the Piri Reis map, if there's a scale on it, it's down in the corner and you got to do the math yourself, that sort of thing.
the old anyone that's used the military maps. Now sometimes they put
Yeah.
grids, but you don't have to. It's just like, oh, okay. Actually, if you remember the old Greyhawk map, I think they had that on the edges and the sides, where it'd be like A, B, C, D, and then they'd have it on the same the bottom, and you could follow it through if I remember correctly. But yeah, the other option is in the modern day when you can start putting things into a
Like a
into an
virtual tabletop.
electronic, but in an electronic format is you can have both, one with and one without, and that makes
Yeah.
it really nice.
And just remember that a lot of the virtual tabletops have the gridding capability. So I mean, it really just depends. That's one of the big challenges I think of getting anything out there is right now is what format are you going to put it in? If it's an actual product that's like a commercial product and not just something that you're going to be sharing in a Google Doc or something.
Or PDF. Well, I'm going to try to work with Biggest Geekist, just because I know the guys and they're great guys, and anything I can do to help them out, I want to do so. Um, if you haven't seen Biggest Geekist, shame on you, because I'm pretty sure I've seen every single one of you guys over at Biggest Geekist at one point or another. Um, But yeah, that's what the little guy and I are going to be working on this year. As soon as I can get a couple of, things ironed out, I need to get a new computer. But Rick, how you doing, man? Don't fall
Good.
asleep on us, man.
Good. No, I'm not going to fall asleep.
He's just he's trying to get that blood going, because he's up north where they see this stuff, this white stuff off in the sky. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I just came back from work, so it's been a long day, but we can sit and yak and stuff. Yes, anybody who has any questions, direct it to me. I'll yak, but until then, I'll just kind of keep a little bit quiet. But
yeah, I got to say, man, I'm digging your Traveler online games on Sunday. To be honest, it's probably one of the best live plays out there, when it comes to the truest essence of role playing. And
really, thanks.
I really think so. I'm not a big rules heavy guy, and Traveler's the perfect system for that. Other than if you want to go absolute minimalistic, you can hook up with Total Party Skills. I'm reading through his book, and it's a lot of fun. A little more rules light than than I expected, but maybe there's more in the other book because I just picked up the vintage sci-fi, and that's a hoot. I can't wait to finish that one. It's a lot of fun. Well, I'm going to do a review on it this week once I finish the rest of it. I'm trying not to read it too fast because it's really enjoyable. I just some of you have seen the new minis I got from Hydra Miniatures, the retro ray gun sci-fi miniatures. I'm like, oh man, perfect timing. It's all vintage sort of 1940s, 50s Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon meets Barbarella. If you can imagine that sort of. They even have the Jetsons from the old cartoon as some like if you need miniatures for just basic sci-fi people walking around the town, they've got George and Judy and Elroy in miniature form. I seriously, I laughed my butt off. Just just fun stuff. Just good old fashioned. I was kind of bummed that there was nothing like Commando Cody, but everything else is pretty much covered. Even a lot of stuff really reminiscent of John Carter, one of my favorites, and the Flash Gordon, Flash Gordon, the '80s movie. Some stuff that's really, kind of right up that alley as well. And who can't enjoy that movie every once in a while? But I wanted to ask you, Rick, what's the other game you're running? The sort of fantasy game?
That is, it's derived off the Cipher system. So it's the actual name for it is God Forsaken. But I'm basically just taking the framework of God Forsaken, like using all the basic mechanics that they have included in that system. Just kind of what where you could categorize the weapons and stuff like that you would find in typical fantasy kind of tropes. Take and the cipher, in the cipher versions of all the the actual ciphers is what I was interested in. The one-offs that you could use, like potions, that sort of stuff. So it has all that in there, which was really kind of helpful, and I didn't have to go ahead and start making up stuff on the fly. So it was good.
I like the cipher idea better than artifacts because they're one use, and you can make something that's overpowered without worrying about it destroying your game. You're like, man, that's too powerful, but there's only one of them, so they can't reuse it. So that to me is there's some ideas I really like from the cipher system. I'm just not a big fan of the D20. I like something that's a little less linear, but other than that, I've got Forsaken, like you were talking about. If you ignore the rules, it's still a really good book out there to just explain on how to do a fantasy world. Anyone that's looking for a background on how to do something like that, I do recommend getting that just for that very reason.
And just all of the stuff that Monty Cook does, even though some people go, Monty Cook, he's got some real brilliant people in behind him, thinking up all this really weird and creative stuff. And stuff like The Strange, Numenera, that really gets you looking at different kinds of cultures and different kinds of worlds and everything. Because, The Strange is kind of like, you're going into different worlds, like different dimensions and stuff. And every game can be incredibly different than normal. So
a quick question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Have you tried out their? I mean, I have it. I just haven't really dug into it. Is there a Black Sun or whatever it's called?
The Invisible Sun.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I missed out on that. I did see it. It does come up every once in a while. I might get the big black box. I'm not too sure. It's iffy. It's kind of like. I did invest in the Weird. That was their last one that they came up with. So I definitely went with that.
I mean, I did. Well, they had it on roll on Bundle of Holding for like $220, and I was just curious if you looked at it because it seems like it's really cool. And I will say this much: anyone that gets a Monte Cook thing book, their PDFs are stellar. They are linked and cross-referenced, and if they're actually, in my view, because I know how long it takes to do hyperlinks and you put everything in there. I like physical books to read, but boy, when you have to get a book out, man, having that electronic copy and you're reading something and it references somewhere else, you just click on it and it hyperlinks right there. It's probably the best PDF of any RPG I've seen so far.
Hey, Rick, I wanted to ask you a question also. I was, because I watched the Cipher game and the Traveler game, and this has been bugging me probably since I met Shauner. The differences between a fantasy, as close to D&D as possible game and Traveler. Have you noticed that it's probably more difficult to do a fantasy game over a sci-fi game in the truest, role-playing sort of way? Because for me, I've seen that there's kind of like a lot of, not necessarily pitfalls, but complications that you just aren't going to come up with in a sci-fi game. Sci-fi seems in a lot of ways like easier or simpler.
I guess it's in creativity wise, it's a lot easier.
In actually implementation of role playing at the table. With spells and magic items and more rules mechanics between those particular things, especially magic items and spells, and with Traveler there's not a lot of these special abilities. Even if you have psionics, that's really kind of easier, maybe.
I suppose, but there is a lot of things that you can that you have to keep track in sci-fi as well. I mean, if you've got the ship and your game master, you got to think of, okay, what did they do to modify it, all that stuff. You're writing down notes just to kind of keep yourself in line of keeping track of everything. And occasionally they'll have like a battle suit or something like that, or some sort of really weird armor or something like that. I always put that stuff in my games. Like, there's always weird artifacts in my games, but I did take a lot of that in from Cipher system, so or Numenera. But that's why I like to mix that up a bit. So I'm not taking Traveler as what you read in all the Traveler books and stuff like that,
Right.
like books on the Imperium and stuff. I use a little bit of that, but my
area, none of that, but
yeah. So I take some of that stuff, but I mean, I don't know. It depends. I feel like they're kind of equal, but I find that you are kind of more restricted creative wise with fantasy, as in you're kind of stuck in a place unless you do, like you were saying, like something like Planescape or something, where they can go into different realms and stuff like that, which was awesome. It was a clever idea at the time, so it really opened up things for
because I'm seeing some issues that I could I could come across with, like, for example, the party finds some things, and going into the detecting magic and finding out all the abilities, and especially like a magic item that has 3 or 4 different magical abilities with command words, and doing the research, then figuring out how to get it to work. I could see that some of those things can really potentially break you out of in character mode at the table, unless you do something to mitigate that, by sending a big long text to just somebody off to the side while you're playing.
Yeah, I can give you kind of a perspective on the fantasy side, since I do more fantasies than sci-fi. I would say that what I think happens is that if you have something other than the players, like if you have a magic user or something like that, and they have their spells, well, they need to know what their spells are and what they can do. It's like And in the
Absolutely.
old days, it's like you kind of have to have their 3x5 cards or something like that have their spells on it, so they know what they do and they can reference them and look at stuff. That's kind of for me that's essential. But anything outside of that, what I find is that not giving them those box of texts is like the answer for me. It's like I have the box of text. They're not really clear on what it does. And if they forget what it does, then they got to figure it out again. So what I do is just kind of make it into, well, they know that they have this thing and, somebody's carrying it or whatever. They don't know exactly how it works. They don't know all the powers it has unless they're able to do something that it reveals itself to them. And then if you're in that situation, then they still don't get the text. They got to make their own notes about it. Like I kind of turned it into, it's almost a it's a character. Well, yeah, it's like it's a character in the narrative at that point. And that's why I think that having too many magic items is not something that you want to do. I know that they have in 5e, they try to address that with the attunement and that kind of stuff. Really, personally, I just like a world that doesn't have that much magical stuff when it is something that people could control. Like you can have plenty of magical stuff that is kind of outside the player's control, whether it's like big in scale or they just can't manipulate it or whatever. But those items that they can actually do something with, like, yeah, it's pretty limited. And I like the consumable thing too. Hey, Shauner.
What's up, Shauner? If you want to jump in, I'll throw you the link in the comment section. I'm just trying to, I've played a lot of D&D type games over the years, and I'm trying to get away from fantasy for the most part this year and really do as much sci-fi as possible, and maybe even some Western and some other stuff, because I've done it to death. I mean I've played decades straight of pure fantasy, and not that it's boring or anything like that. Just me personally, I've done a lot of stuff,
right.
And what I haven't done a lot of is sci-fi. Even when I did sci-fi, it was at like a really high level. The characters were rich and wealthy and kind of powerful already,
right.
And I want to get down to some of that sort of Firefly kind of really low,
more gritty.
Or
maybe not like
use that word.
themes.
I'm tired of that word, but yeah. Totally dark and gritty. Not even dark necessarily, but just nuts and bolts, regular Joes.
Yeah.
Trying to make ends meet, day to day, with the ability to go, from planet to planet, doing the things,
I'm going to put it out this way, because you're talking about sci-fi and how everyone does it. A lot of people grab onto fantasy because they have fantasy is very easy to grasp. It's basically, I'm living in the Middle Ages. It's very easy for them to put there, and now I'm going to put in some monsters so they can add that. Mm-hmm. The problem that I think that we really have, when people are talking about this, and in the 1970s, you didn't have fantasy. You had sci-fi all over the place. And so in the early 80s, everyone was taking that. I mean, if you look at Space 1999, Star Wars, Star Trek,
Blake 7.
I mean, all of these properties that were out there, Battlestar Galactica. And I think the problem that we're having nowadays is, can someone please name me, other than The Expanse, a well-known popular series for sci-fi?
Actually, I came across one. Okay, bear with me. It's animated, but it's called, I believe, Love, Death, and Robots on Netflix.
I know. Yeah, those are shorts, right?
Yes, but every one of them, I could take any one of them and just like go off the deep end with them. They're so, they're really interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's the one with the three robots that are exploring Earth after the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. That I don't think I'd want to run that one.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's a great show if you haven't caught it, and you want something quick and like you said, they're shorts. They're like 10, 15-minute long little cartoons of various styles of animation, but they're all a lot of fun. Just they pack so much into just a small amount of time that yeah, and Laura's got a good one, Cowboy Bebop. Although I haven't seen the new one, and hi Laura, I don't know that anything about the new one. The old one was a class act all the way, and if your Traveler or Sci-Fi game can't like borrow a little from Cowboy Bebop, you're really kind of missing out.
Right.
So I'm going to bring something up. So everyone's bringing stuff, but we're all forgetting because we view them as fairly soon. Firefly was over 20 years ago. Stargate was very similar. And that's what I'm saying. Contemporary. Battlestar Galactica, the new version, and in 2009. I will say this much, regardless of how you feel about whoever's printing it. This is actually really good for capturing 3 different versions. You can go for Star Wars, you can go for Firefly, and then you can go for Cowboy Bebop. And I think it does a really good job for that.
Who puts that out?
What's that?
Who puts that out? Evil Hat?
Evil Hat. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So
fair enough.
I like what they did there, but then, the only other Expanse is the newest one that we have for a multi-season, I want to call high sci-fi. We're talking about where they move outside of the universe. Now, I don't have any problems finding players that want to play Alien the RPG players, because they know the world, they can feel it. They're like, yeah, I'm into that one. And same thing with Star Wars. If they like Star Wars, they're pretty much into it. But other than that, we don't have too much. There's Star Trek, but I don't hear a lot of young people screaming or anything else. Like, oh yeah, Star Trek, we got to do this.
And somebody just mentioned Black Mirror, and I mean, but again, it's like it's another mini series, right? Like it's like it's not like
Twilight Zone, pure sci-fi Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I think this is more a change in media than because I know that you guys seem to be talking about like the multi-season kind of grand and deep and long-lasting shows, but I just don't know if that's really how people consume media so much anymore. Even Stranger Things, it's like, how much time is there going to be between seasons of these things, right? It's like I just don't think that things are produced in the same way.
Yeah, I think people's attention span is dropped with a certain generation and younger. They're so used to,
honestly, I think it's the production company's attention span.
Right. You might have a point there, because they may be misjudging the audience.
Yeah.
What was I know a little bit of, but like Jordan Peterson said, is they can't get enough of long running shows. Like when we were in the 70s, to have a 2-part episode was, oh my God, that was the big thing. But man, when you get into the 90s and then 2000s and later, it is episodic for the whole thing. Is you have to, like Babylon 5 being a perfect example. It takes stuff from season 1 and season 2 and brings into season 4 and 5, where you have to go, oh, okay, I want to watch the whole thing. But I have to be careful on some of these things that, we're looking at it as being in our 50s or 40s and 50s. And so we're like, oh, we've got this and that. That's true. But like my son didn't grow up with Star Wars, even though I wanted him to get that. He did grow up with Harry Potter. So there's some of that aspect. So the hard part is, we just need a really good sci-fi
and I think
series.
You just hit it. I think Harry Potter is probably one of the longest running things that is kind of like, and I'm mid-30s, so I'm kind of like right in between like some of this media divide.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy like the classic more longer running things. But yeah, I mean personally, the farther that time goes, basically since maybe 10 years ago, I mean, I'm doing more writing and more creation of things myself than actually like watching things. And really it's like, well, where do you watch things? It's like I haven't had cable for over a decade. It's like what are these shows that are really everybody's watching? I guess Game of Thrones is one that's probably
but it's a fantasy. And that's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say. It's very easy
Yeah,
for people to get into those worlds and find
Mhm.
RPGs for it. But if I told
Right.
someone Firefly, I'd say, oh, the only way that you can do this is you have to go over here and you have to watch this, and it's not
Mhm.
the same buzz for that.
And
Um,
The Expanse, like
know,
you said, that's really the only one I can think of.
mhm.
Elfbait mentioned this show that I got to give him kudos for. Dark Matter. Did anybody watch that? It was
I
like
don't.
three.
Mhm.
It was like 3 seasons, maybe 4. I don't remember. And the last episode of the last season was like boom, and then it got canceled, and it was about to go into something just absolutely
Mhm.
just awesome, and
Mhm.
that was it.
So,
Just left you hanging. Never
and
came back. Like,
another one I just thought about, which I can't really even remember how old it is, but I know that it's probably outside the scope of what we're talking about. But Defiance, that went for a few good seasons, and I was a huge I really like that show. I mean, I think it's a little campy, but I think
Even my
that's kind
wife
of
liked it.
Yeah,
I
but I
like
think
Yeah.
I like the first
yeah.
couple of seasons, and
I,
then
I
it was
never
canceled.
saw it. I'm gonna have to start
Mhm.
taking notes. Of,
So Defiance was really good up until the very end, but you could kind of feel the turn of like, oh, this show has a shelf life, and they're just kind of going into a storyline that's a little bit more grandiose and gonna kind of like end, like it's gonna be like a big not tire. But yeah, the first like 3 seasons are pretty great.
Well, and like Elfbait's mentioning, is talking about there are a lot of really good sci-fi games. Absolutely. I think part of the problem that you do have in certain cases is role playing is inherently a party experience, and if you're
Mhm.
not, if you don't have a party for it, like for Halo, that's pretty much single person. You don't get that same effect as you would from an ensemble series like The Expanse or Babylon 5 or Star Trek, where you can say, oh, this person does this, and they each have their own little niche to go play in.
Mhm.
okay,
Yeah.
why is Nathan's show? Are you guys seeing that little square up there for Nathan's quantum
Yes.
show?
Yeah.
I
I
see
don't
it.
know why that's doing that.
Uh,
I mean, I'm part of the show. I mean, it's basically, we do it together. Um, Welcome, Bo. Shauna, if you want to come in, there's still room for one more. Um, I'm just tripping out on that. I hope I'm not, I hope I didn't do something to mess with his show right now.
It's
If he's got a
quantum.
show, I know, right? I know, right?
There are no
Have to have
accidents,
one this
Shadow.
week too. And welcome to the show, Bo. Again, great game. And now that Bo's here, I figured we could
Hang out in the
get
chat
into
forever.
Bo might have some questions.
yeah,
Well,
yeah. Does Sal have any questions,
I
young sir?
did. I thought about some things last night about more like my advice as someone who just finished my first game. Again this century. You're never going to be ready. You're never going to be ready enough. So what you got to do is you got to just jump in and do it. And 2, you can't make a mistake. So you jump in the game, and if things don't go as you expected, you just say, "Let's do it live." Fido.
No. That's not true. I'm going to bring up something.
Yeah.
Well, since we're talking about new GMs, the most important thing is you have to be excited about your setting. Number one. Number two, the players want to play the game. Try and get players that don't want to play a game is pretty much going to doom it anyway. And number 3 is almost all players that I've known that want to play a game are completely forgiving of DMs making mistakes. They're very, because they want to play a game. They want to be there. They want to go through. And as long as you're fair and you try taking input and try making the game better, players are going to say, you know what, this may not be my favorite, but I'm not going to get anywhere else, and so I'm going to. I don't want to say suffer through it because that's not true. If they're having fun, they want to go through it over and over again. So yeah.
Well, I think in my specific case was that this is this is a campaign setting that I'd been thinking about for months and had notes and I'm reminded that no plan survives first contact. So when the first time the players zig when you expect them to zag, you just have to say, you know what, we can save that plot point for another time, or we can say, well, what happens if things go different? I'm reminded that the sort of the setting up the campaign like a clock, right? I make a clock, I wind up the clock, I put the clock down, and the players interact with the clock. The question we mentioned it earlier first is, how do you find people to play a game that's not 5e? In this this modern environment, there is we live kind of in this mixed blessing. It's a golden age for gaming, and there's a lot of people on the shelves, but you can't find people to play things that really aren't, at least normies. You can't find normies to play games that aren't 5e. And I think that we sort of were in a bubble here, in that I'm dealing with a lot of really experienced gamers and people that have really been around the block, but you guys are not the average role-playing gamer.
Right.
I'm
I
going
think
to
that is
say
a
this.
compliment.
I'm going to say,
Oh, it's absolutely a compliment.
my normie friends, the problem, it's not really a problem. I think part of it is, one is, and I use his wife as a perfect example of a typical player. She has learned a system. She's afraid to try a new system. So you have to find a system that's very easy for players to understand.
Right.
They have to feel, now sometimes they won't accept a whole new thing. Like I said, for Alien, we're like, oh yeah, I want to be in that world. The setting trumps system any day of the week.
Yeah.
And I'm going to bring something up for 28 millimeter here. Have you done anything with Predation?
I've seen it. I have it on PDF. Yeah, I haven't used anything out of it though, but yeah, I've seen it.
Well, I mean, I like this as the setting because you mix dinosaurs with the futuristic, so you can get lasers on your dinosaurs and all sorts of other cool crap. And that to me is just fun. And I think that sometimes we're missing some of, as much as people talk about Gonzo stuff.
Gonzo,
Mhm.
yeah.
But well, I mean, it's Gonzo, but man, as much as we talk about 5e players, they kind of like Gonzo in certain ways.
Oh, you do. I mean, 5e is the highest fantasy setting, just like baseline that I think D&D has ever been, and yeah, I think that people are wanting to play things that are basically at the level of superheroes, and because I mean, I look at a 5e NPC, and that's a superhero. That's not an OSR like level 1 fighter. That's a
Not even close. Yeah.
yeah. That's
So on topic then,
good.
completely on topic with Shadows, with the theme of the night. Excuse me. How do you get people to play and to run and play sci-fi games then? Because the Saturday night show is typically about a sci-fi games. We want to play sci-fi games, or we wouldn't be here. We want to promote playing sci-fi games. Shadow said at the beginning of the show, right? I'm fantasied out. Personally, one of the things that drove me away from role-playing games was Peter Jackson. I had to deal with his movies. Hey, they were great movies the first time I watched them. By the time I watched them 3 or 4 times, I never want to look at fantasy ever again. I'm done.
Yeah, I was actually torn on those movies. I liked a lot about them, but then there were these little things that made me just like, okay, I don't even own them on DVD, and I've read Tolkien, the trilogy and The Hobbit 20 times already. But yeah, it just
No, I'm not talking about the movies. I'm talking about the pop culture references, the phenomenon.
Right, yeah.
The early 2000s, they were everywhere.
And suddenly everybody was an expert, by thinking that, oh yeah, I watched the movies, 3 times. Now I'm an expert. Yeah. Go read the books and get back to me. But I think we touched on at the beginning of the show, and Shauna kind of does this too, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but using a TV show or a movie or something like that to describe what your game is going to simulate or emulate or mimic in some way to get people into it. It's like, yeah, I'm going to play a game, or I'm going to run this game, and it's going to be very Shauna's now 20 minutes behind the stream.
He's not listening. That's only you get 20 minutes behind the stream.
You know what? I'm going to put the link back in there for Sean if he wants to come in, because it's been forever since Seaners joined us.
So,
I know he's super busy. He makes so many videos. Yeah, I'm like, wow, man. I'm behind on his videos, but I think that's one way is to just use the TV or the movies, and say,
Well,
I'm running a game. It's like this.
but I think that's why I said Alien. I don't have any problems finding people who want to play Alien. They know it. They feel like that's a world they want to play in. And that's what I think sometimes what we're missing, and I know Elfbay was mentioning it, is there are certain games that sound cool, but is it there? And you also have to have that background lore, which is what helps out with Lord of the Rings or anyone that's played Warhammer. They have huge amounts. You have the Warhammer stuff. I think some of it really just comes down to, how do I want to put this? People who want to play fantasy know that they're generally going to be playing medieval Renaissance era. That's
well, just think about it.
Kind of.
I mean, how many of the things that, or like the series that we talk about a lot, like Babylon 5, Star Trek, The Expanse, like these are all stories where a lot of the action and main characters are in a very structured environment. Like, they're in a military organization, they're in a paramilitary organization, they're in a what do you call it? They're in a what do I
they're in
want
a
to say?
fixed location. Even if the ship moves, they're still in the fixed location.
Right. They're experts in doing a very specific thing until, kind of all hell breaks loose or something like that. I think one of the draws of fantasy is that the adventuring part of it is less structured. I think a lot of people live in structured environments and they kind of want to get outside of that. That's just like something that I'm thinking of it. Really, the only one that's kind of outside of that I can Firefly and Star Wars are kind of like the ones that are more outside of that. But
I would
think
go more Firefly than Star Wars, just because the whole rebellion.
Because that's space opera. I mean, it's a whole different genre. But yeah,
just to let you know that Firefly. Okay, if you go for and this is just to put this out there, for Bo's sake. In the case of Firefly, the first episode was pretty much like they were doing a job which was to rob a train, basically, some sort of form like that, right? It was our train robbery kind of thing that was going on. That's kind of like what you have to do with the sci-fi. Establish the characters together into a situation right away. They're doing a thing, and then from then on, what happens with the group and stuff like that. Where in a fantasy, I mean, you could do the tavern thing where everybody gathers, which is just horrible for me. I'd rather have them in front of the gates to some sort of crypt that they're about to enter in, and then have the players bond with the situation, and they create this relationship with each other. If you just let people kind of just spread around and do the thing, like not go with a structure, which is what I'm trying to kind of point out here, it's somewhat of a structure, but if you don't have that, then sometimes your game will fail, where they're going way out, in different directions, that they don't have any idea of what we're supposed to do here. You don't
want players to not have a purpose in the story.
That's right.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I'm sorry. There's a bit of delay, but basically it's like, okay, we're in front of like you said, like the crypt. It's like we have a reason that we're here, right? Like that kind of thing.
This is why, as much people talk about, this is why I believe that you should be doing a session 0. Everyone get together, everyone work out, figure out what everyone wants. The problem that I have too often, and here's the other part that we have to remember. One is anything that's not 5e D&D, it's hard you have a much more narrow subset. So even the next closest one, which would be Call of Cthulhu, apparently has only 20% of the players that 5e does. And then it keeps getting smaller and smaller. It's kind of hard to get players into a game if they don't have the books and things like that, where they aren't familiar. I love the fact, and more recently, we have all of these free to play RPG, day that they talk about, and you can try the system out and see if you like it. And as much as we talk about this all the time, we keep looking at campaign. The reality of it is as players, especially if you're bringing them over from a game before, they don't know if they like it. They don't know if they like their characters. And if you suddenly put them in a campaign, they're not going to be happy if it doesn't quite work out the way they want. If it's a one shot or 3 shots, what I'm starting to find out some of these. Oh, thank God, I'm not stuck doing this. I'm not obligated. And removal of that obligation makes them more willing to actually try new systems. And the other part, I think, and I know that 28 millimeter does probably a lot more for this, but if you're going to be in face-to-face, make everything as seamless and easy as possible. I used to, and I'm just going to use Conan in this example, but I did something similar with Scum and Villainy, which they had fun with. But what I do is I will print out pages for them, and I will say, here you go. You can flip through, tactile. I'll give you some beads for your health. I'll do this. And players, I don't know. I just think human beings overall, even my ex, who will never play role-playing games, if I put dice in front of her, she'll roll dice. There's always something tactile. If you can give people that tactile feel and you get their senses engaged, they'll be more likely to play with it. And I think we need to stop looking at everything as I want to run a campaign. But what you want to do is you want to run a one shot and then see if they enjoy it. And if they do, then you can keep playing. And then they don't feel obligated. And only after the point that they like the system, they like the world, then say, hey guys, would you like to do a campaign? Yeah, I would. Okay, let's start trying to create characters. Let's sit down and do that. But until you do that, this is the problem that I have with it is whenever someone's running something and I don't know the system, I don't want to buy into a system if I don't like the if it's going to be like, hey, we're going to do this every Friday night. Well, that's okay, but sometimes it's just like, I don't know if I like it, and don't force me to be there. So anyway, that's my little rant about it.
Some good points.
I think it's weird that we're all systems people. Like, it's obvious, right? Like, it's like we have different books on our shelves. We're looking at different things all the time. It's hard to get into the mindset of somebody that's coming on the other side of the table. But really, I think that really is the thing. It's like if you are good at your job as the referee or the game master, however you want to put it, and you're just giving them an opportunity to see more. Like, I think that's the big thing. And I used to make a big mistake on this a lot when I played a lot of EVE Online. And when I would try to basically market people into joining our corporation, I would tell them way too much. And I would want to talk to them for like 3 hours because I just like to share the stories that you could have in a sci-fi setting like that. But really, they want it to be their story. So it's like you have to give them a little bit of details that makes them want to ask about more, but you have to kind of like give them a little bit of the details. Does that sound cool? Okay, let's go do it. And then, you can kind of have those conversations when you're, kind of in the middle of or like in lull periods. You can have a little bit of the campfire stories when you're just kind of waiting for something to happen in EVE, because there's a lot of times like you're out and you're hunting for things or whatever. There's some downtime. You need to fill it. It's the perfect opportunity to bring more of those campfire stories, I guess, like those lore, like the lore and the history of what you've actually done.
The other thing I think is the rules need to be simple. Too often in a lot of games is they need to be complicated. And I know you've been talking about Cipher. People pick up Cipher with no problem. And what's funny is I have never seen anyone turn down a GM intrusion, even when it screws them. It's funny on that, because if you did that in any other system, because I know there's the experience points, they're just like, they get mad about it. In Cipher, it's like, is it okay if I do a GM intrusion? Like, bring it on. bring it on, and that helps with that. But I'll give you a good example of a couple of, because they're the ones that come out from Modiphius for this, is if I was trying to bring, or even Mutant Chronicles, okay, if I'm not familiar with Mutant Chronicles, I'm not familiar with Homeworld, I'm not familiar with Infinity, how am I going to bring these players into that game? And that's part of the hard part. And I do think that's one of the big advantages for Alien was they have their cinematic scenarios. That's going to be done. You never have to play it again. If your character ends up hurt, you're okay with it, and you can play through it. And people love that aspect. And only then can you figure out maybe we'll do a campaign, even though it may not work as well. And I think that's part of the problem that we're having with a lot of the sci-fi games is how do you bring people into a world? How do you do this? I think the Traveler stuff that I'm seeing coming out more recently is far superior to what I remember as a kid. And if I showed people just the book without much art, the front is uninspiring. How are you going to get people to buy a book? And it's really hard to get someone to buy a 400-page book. Which is fine.
That brings me to something I've been mulling over. Back in the old days, and maybe even in some of the other games like D&D, there used to be player books, that weren't $50. Right. Now it seems like every like really good game is like $50. That's kind of a lot of money for a lot of players that are especially new to the hobby. You tell them, well, you got to get this book, or you can borrow my book, but you got to bring it back. Be careful with it. It's it's $50, $69, whatever, and they're just like, yeah, I didn't want it, to take another college class,
Well,
maybe. So I really like the idea of the photocopies and the handouts, and doing something that's easy to get. Not just new GMs, but especially new players.
Right.
So the new GMs have people to play a new game. It doesn't, that's not like buying a Warhammer 40K army, right off the bat. That's a serious hobby. If you think about it. Okay, we all need to chip in. All this much money. So the DM can get this book and this book and this book, etc.
I actually, you know what? No, I'm looking at what Sean Sherry. GM is the only one buying books. I found that players buy the books if they're going to be using them, but they're not going to buy a book just because they're interested in something that's cool. You have to really sell them on the system for that. And this is where I think Traveler did a really good job, is their introductory kit or whatever. The introductory kits have gotten so much better for those starter games. And 5e has done it, and I don't think enough of them are doing it. I mean, Free League does it as well. You bring it in, guess what? You got cards. Your cards determine on what weapons you have. And
right.
That's
the third edition D&D starter set. That was probably the best one that I've ever used. I saw the 5e starter set, but the closest I got was Minds of Phandelver, which was like an earlier one, but they have a better one out now. But yes, pre-gens, like scenarios for teaching the rules. You're not really even playing the game yet, but it was, especially in the third edition one, it was presented in a way that was kind of like a little mini scenario. I mean, I started campaigns literally going out of the starter box, and then maybe people wanted to change their character or something like that a bit, and then you just kind of like, one for one, just put them in, and then you're still going. That was that made it to where I could get anybody that was interested in the concept of playing a fantasy role-playing game. Now, I know you guys are talking about sci-fi, but I think it's the exact same thing. It's like, you have a good starter, pre-gen, easy rules, just get people like going through the motions of the regular kind of flow play, and then just go off to the races, because then they're interested at that point. And then you got a couple of weeks or a week or whatever to come up with something, as the person running the game, to give them some direction on what to do, because that's a big thing too. Is like, I think a lot of people want to play like something that's open and sandbox because they like the idea of it, but most players have no idea what's going to be interesting to them in terms of like actual content that'll be in the game.
I mean, just talking about the Alien one. I mean, that's a pretty good box. They keep them fairly cheap. I think this is like $40 or $50. So the GM is the only one that has to do it. Okay, you got the dice. That's fine. But you get cards. You get, you know, look, you get, it looks like weapons. You get to see what's there. I can now just hand these to players, and they're like, oh, okay. And then it has on the back where they can read it. And again, I think there's that tactile aspect that matters so much for myself. Even when I have the dice roller, I would rather roll dice on my own thing. Sometimes I do it just because I want other players to see it. And then, like you're talking about for that, is not that the players mind so much, but, you know, I mean, this is a big map.
If you're a new storyteller, you have no idea what you're doing either. You know what I mean? It's like you need to you need an introductory product to get you comfortable with it. So I mean, you might be one step ahead of the character, or I'm sorry, of the players in terms of having read, but you know, you're pretty much all on the same page in terms of going through the motions of actually playing the game.
And artwork does stuff, but there you go. I'm just using this because I think it's an excellent example of how to get people into at least Alien, which is, oh, I have my character, I flip it over, I can see it, I can figure that, and then I get the next side, which has the skills. That's great. If the rules are simple, that's a big plus for Alien. And then, as much as we talk about, counters are always cool. A perfect example is, I wish that they would do more like the original Star Frontiers box.
That was a fantastic box for its time. It had not only did it have everything you needed to play in it, but depending on which box, like the basic, the first box literally had 2 games in it, as did the second one. You literally got, you know, the role-playing game and then the role-playing game light, I guess, or the spaceship rules for the other game, or just a freaking spaceship game. And back then, that was like $20.
Right. Well, and to be fair, that would be equivalent of $50 now. But players don't feel like...
I know, but it didn't really seem like that back then. If that makes any sense to me, because I was a really young kid buying those box sets, and I didn't, you know, getting $20 from my parents wasn't like my son asking me for 50 today.
Okay, well, I'm gonna put it this way: I got an allowance. I got $3.50. It would take me 5 weeks to get stuff for that, or to buy a.
I was getting about the same, but I was also mowing lawns and selling candy at school. I'd buy a pack of gum, you know, for 20 cents or something, and then sell each piece for a dime. And then, you know, over the course of a single school year, I made an obscene amount of money, you know, selling bubblegum to my fellow classmates. But that's a whole nother.
But I think Star Frontiers is a perfect example of what a starter set should be. And I wish that they would do more of stuff like that. Again, the Traveler one, if you look at it, it has, I think if you get the basic Explorer, even if it's $1, I think on drive-thru, and it's $30 if you buy it normally. It's not the full-blown version, but you can create a scout. That's enough. You can get a few. It has everything that you need to know on how to play, and I think that's a great thing. And I think that's where I've noticed that more and more companies are doing that right now. Is whether it's RuneQuest. I never used to see that RuneQuest. That's great. And then once you get through it, and another cinematic. Well, it's the same thing. I get this. It has maps. It has everything else. So I think that when we look at it, is you can go over and buy the book, but the other problem that you have, and I don't know how it was when you were kids, is here's the rule book, but now I want to also go buy the monster manual. Well, now I'm losing some of the surprise for it. But nowadays, and I'm not blaming anyone for this. D&D can get away with it because it's established. But the old basic set that came in the original stuff was the similar way. Look, we got a book of basic rules. We have some monsters in the back. You got some dice. It's all contained. Players don't have to go anywhere else. Someone that's new to the game can just go right into it. And I think that's that to me is the big thing is starter sets are where things need to go, and only then do you ease them into the more complex, in-depth aspect of some of these systems.
And really, it's the I mean, I think I was talking to maybe not this crowd, but the PGMS, which is the PGMS, Game Master Society, folks with VB Weird and stuff. The products that they can sell after you get people off of the starter set. I mean, they're going to be mission based almost. They're going to be like it's not like kind of like open and what are we going to do. I honestly I think that's a much more advanced way to play after people have been playing through like an adventure book or scenario, that kind of thing. They sell okay, but I think the thing is that they want to make like one set of them almost or something like that, and it's like that's the only thing that they're going to make. And I think of like a company like Hasbro, and it's like you should be turning out like 20 of these a week. I mean, like, if you're pulling in and you have some people writing third party and that kind of stuff, it's like you have to have the most and the best content, or else nobody would pay for anything. And they're just gonna be like, well, people are just going to copy it. And it's like, well, I don't know. The virtual tabletops are pretty locked down, and a lot of people play them that way. And they can, there's different value in those things on the way that, like they structure the content that you get for those things. But I mean, that can be profitable, but I don't think that it can be profitable the way they want it to be, where it's like, I have to pay a writer one time to do this, and now I have all this residual. And it's like, I mean, it's not going to happen. And with the starter sets, we're talking about like these are basically the consoles with the pack-in game. You know what I mean? And no game company in the world has ever made money on their console in the pack-in game.
Well,
it's that now they play the game. So now if you put other games out, they will play them.
RPGs are not where you're going to be making your most of your money anyway. We do it generally because we love it. And there are a few companies that can do it. And if you remember the 1E versus the 2E, 1E seemed to have pretty good products that were hardbacks. I mean, we can argue about the adventures. 2E just spammed splat book after splat book, and up to the point that the quality went way down. And that's the other part in there.
But I'm not talking about splat books.
Yeah,
I mean, splat books are like that's raw material basically. Well, it's like
Traveler. I know you guys look at Traveler. I like the fact that when I was reviewing the 2022, if you want more detail, we're going to be bringing out this one on ships. If you want more detail, we're going to be bringing this one out. And people who love the system are now going to go buy those. But every time you buy one pass, you're going to lose the number of players. So your introductory set should sell the most, and then your normal thick core rule book should sell the second most, and then anything that goes for that.
Yeah, but they're trying to sell rules again. Like that's the problem. Sell content, sell actual adventures, sell actual campaigns.
Adventures don't make any money. I don't like buying adventures. What I'm saying is settings, like settings are what sell. If you can get a really good setting, then players will go through it because that takes a lot of the work off of them. But adventures, unfortunately, you have to get. It's almost sometimes as much work to take an adventure and modify it for your individual game group. But a setting I can take anywhere. It doesn't matter. It's like,
but again, I think this is a problem in. And I don't want to talk about business stuff too much. We're trying to do new GM stuff, but really, from what I've seen with the business stuff, is that they don't market it the right way. It's like you don't want somebody that's homebrewing. Like your core audience for something like the adventures are people that are picking up the book. Like I said, they're still one step ahead of the players in terms of reading the book, and maybe they understand the rules a little bit better, but they're working their regular job, and this is a little bit, this is not like a huge amount of their disposable income. This is just something that they do that's fun with their friends, either in person or online, and they go through it. Like and we don't see those people because those people aren't on a podcast show online, you know.
Well,
Speaking of being on a podcast show, Shauner, what's happening, man?
What's up, Sean? But really,
Same
for
old,
new
same old.
GMs, new GMs, really, what I would say is that those adventures, they will teach you how to structure an adventure. Like if
Okay.
you've never written something in your entire life, like do those first. And
I'll
maybe
say
it's
that
not.
is
Yeah.
I like having adventures in there, but I only will buy 1 or 2 for a system, and I'm done. And
Right.
that's all. That's why I said this. I think that you should have introductory adventures, and a lot of the newer books do have them, and that's or the box sets have that adventure in there. But after that, then really people are going to take it and own it their own way, and I think settings are a better way to go.
Yeah. But we're the creative people and we're the wide people, right?
Yeah.
Like we're talking about multiple game systems and all that kind of stuff. We're not the core audience, or we shouldn't be. Like if they think that we're the core audience, like they
They're
have
in for a
not
world
done
of hurt.
they haven't done correct marketing, market analysis. They're just looking at the people that actually are on shows.
Anyway, but the whole thing
So-
of getting new people in for players.
Mhm.
Players are buying accessories more than they are anything else. They'll buy maybe the core book, and they
Mhm.
might buy whatever supplies to them. But
Right.
but what you do is you sell them accessories. You sell them a miniature that's like, what is it? Is it Hero Forge or one of them where you actually make your own mini? You
Mhm.
sell that to the players. You sell the rules to and settings mostly to the DM. And if you really want to, and this is where I think TSR did it, and I think 40K does it as well, is players who enjoy it will buy your fiction, and you need to go work towards books in that aspect rather than trying to start rules and
Well,
everything.
I think what is the issue on the product stuff is that they try to cater to each person's individual character. Like they try to make things that are like that. They shouldn't. They should focus on making their characters and making figurines of those characters and making products that are literally people playing those characters going through scenarios, because the people that are interested in that intellectual property are the people that they can sell stuff to. Us, we can make our own characters, we can homebrew stuff and that kind of thing. We're not the customer. We're not the one that's going to spend a bunch of money.
Well, I'm going to disagree with that, is because as DMs, and if we're going off of what they actually said, the DMs it's 20% of the population, which sounds about right, are buying 80% of their products. And what we want are toolkits and settings. That's what we want. But the players want accessories, and they want what gets me about it is sell more T-shirts, sell like they talk about D&D brand and people do things, but make sure, like I got did you see the one that had the D&D kettle pot? I'm just using this as an example, or the I'm sorry, it was a slow cooker. Like you guys couldn't spend the time to make it look like, I don't know, a cauldron. If you'd done that, then people go, oh yeah, oh you got the D&D cauldron?
But the issue is that Hasbro it doesn't make, George Foreman grills. Like that's not their core competency. But I understand what you're saying about the merchandise.
No, you license that stuff out.
Right.
That's what GW does, and that's how it allowed them to, in the science fiction aspect, is I can find any, when you go into GW, even if you don't buy the minis, and this is, oh, I can get this, I can get that. Oh, there's literature behind it. Oh, there's a role-playing game. There's this. There's so much out there that you can get into the 40K universe that they can do that. So yeah. Anyway.
But it's just like
So
the licensing.
back
How
on-
much money does that actually make them? But we can get back on the GM stuff.
Sure. No, that's fine. Yeah.
So back on topic, guys. Shauner, if you had just one piece of advice to give new GMs out there, what would it be?
Run far away.
Well, in my games, basically the GM and the players are no different from each other. So I guess you want a GM that can role play characters. The good GMs always have characters that they're role playing. Just like the players have one character that they're role playing. the GM has several characters that they're role playing. That's the only difference. I play
Yeah, I would agree.
sandboxes.
I'd agree.
Yeah.
If you have somebody that
I can
tell
get
the
more
story well.
detailed and get all drawn out about what makes poor DMing.
That's all you talk about, Sean.
What to avoid doing.
That's actually
Because I've made all the mistakes. I have made all the mistakes. So when I criticize people on YouTube, I have been that person at one time. And if I can do it, other people should be able to do it too. You know.
Right. I think that's the spirit of why we kind of come here is to do exactly that. When you say to help people out, by giving out advice from all the massive, horrible mistakes we've made in this, silly hobby of ours.
I'm going to say something. We talked about how horrible we did. Yet, did your players still want to play week after week, even after all your mistakes?
Sometimes.
Well, I mean, unless they agree. Usually, it was the players didn't want to play because they felt that you were being unfair, not that you were bad.
No, it's like, are we having fun? Is this something we want to keep doing? Like, what is the point of this? Why are we doing this?
Well, back in the day, there was, there wasn't this this newer idea of what the hobby should be. It was, more of what is this hobby, and I think that lasted a good 20 years before people started really, thinking beyond just that. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, for me, it was there's other things to do.
Oh, yeah.
So after a while, it's like, okay, well, I've done the other things. I'm going to try this tabletop thing again, see what it's like, see if it's changed, what it's like, find out it's still being played the same way. And it's like, okay, something, I'm not doing it that way. I'm not going to be in their reindeer games. I'm going to do it my own way.
We need to break the matrix, Shauner. We need to break that matrix.
I was on Shauner's
So then YouTube
chat.
YouTube had the RPG Brigaders, and I learned from them. We learned from each other. I want to blame World of Darkness for changing how roleplay happened. There's like a fork in the road. There was a fork in the road back in the early, or was it late 80s? Some people went to the full-on role-play, voice acting, storytelling. They went beyond what World of Darkness was about.
Right.
And then some people went towards the Fiasco, Savage Worlds, some of the newer game mechanics that had like option, like rules for role play, like rules that would encourage role play, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm sort of in the middle. I'm stayed in the middle. I don't want to do rules that make you role play, and I don't want to do thespian acting, which isn't necessary at all at the table to do the role play thing.
So what I've always found
I
is
stay in the middle.
Every once in a while, there's like a moment that you just have you're right on it. Like, exactly how to put it in a way that's a little bit more theatrical. But most of the time, it's just like, me and you have talked about, role playing. It's like you're saying what you do, and you're saying, that's basically what it is. It's like, what are you doing? Maybe you're talking to somebody, but that's
if you're recording a game session, it should sound like an audio book.
Yeah.
If everyone's saying what they're doing, if there's the one player who never says anything during the game session except says, what do I need to roll? I rolled a 12. The extent of their role play for the 2-hour session is, I rolled a 13. That's all they say in the audio recording. That person isn't invited again to the next game.
I'm going to say this much: as we're talking about what's theirs. We're talking about new GMs. At the end of the day, a lot of people want to play, and people play for different reasons. You have to read your group. Some people want to roll lots of dice. Some people want to roll one die, and you're going to have to pick a system that meets it. Is I now admittedly it's a board game, but King of Tokyo, I knew that one of my friends, she liked to roll lots of big dice, like as if it was a like Yahtzee. Well, okay, dice pools are perfect for people that like Yahtzee. There are other people that hate that, and you have to find out what's for them. So go ahead, sorry, Shauna.
Well, I come role play first. I get people to role play. We're not even using dice, and I get people to role play first. See if they like it or not. Then I'll add the dice to the mix. Mm-hmm. For me, a GM, technically a GM or a DM or a referee or whoever, is the person who opens the book. The person who wants to read the book and see how the game's played. That's when a GM is born. That person then looks for players. And they do a practice session, just role-playing back and forth their characters. They each make a character. The GM and the player, they practice doing the character gen. They learn how characters are made. They do the role-play bit. Then they go and do, okay, what rules do we use to determine success and failure? But they've got the role-play part already figured out. And then one of them decides, okay, well, I'll be the GM because I have this idea for a setting we can play in. Before that's said, you basically have two players at the table learning the rules.
Yeah.
And practicing role-play.
Yeah. I really, 100% agree with it. It's almost like you want it to be almost like a radio play or something like that. That's 100%. That's how I always approached it when it came to giving just a little bit of the description of things, because you don't have to. They don't. I started writing this in the forward for my book is you are like the shepherd in a shared dream. That is what you are. You're the person that's just at the head of the group, and you're just right ahead of everybody else. And you don't see everything, and you don't want to see everything, because if you see everything, then it's not an adventure for you. It's you're there to.
Oh,
be
you're just the facilitator.
Too. Yeah. So it's
some DMs just want to facilitate a game, a board game for everybody, and organize when the dice get rolled for everybody, so they all have fun at the table.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about for new GMs. And you also have to get new players.
Well, a new GM, I guess it comes first, the system or the setting. Someone goes to a game store, they see Sands of Mars or whatever, they go buy it. They're kind of going to be glued to that system. It's their first system they've ever seen that they've brought home to read. True. And that is going to not brainwash. It's going to influence how they role play for the rest of their life. That first game system they pick up.
Wait a minute. I feel like we're conflating some things. You say that the system is going to affect the way you role play, but when you're playing a character, how can the system affect the way you role play? I can be Shakespeare in Star Frontiers. I can be Shakespeare in FOSSA Star Trek. I'm playing the same character. Come from? How does the system affect the way I play the character?
Where'd the Shakespeare come from?
I'm just saying. I'm just naming a character. I'm playing King Lear. I can play King Lear in any system, and it's the same character. How does the system affect the way I play the character? That's what I'm asking.
Oh, the first two paragraphs of the game explain what role playing is.
To answer
those first two paragraphs.
Yeah, to answer the question, what I would say is that you're somebody that is way more advanced in terms of understanding what a character even is than the average player.
Well, that's what we have to encourage. Then we need to encourage.
Bo. What's your favorite game? What's your favorite game? Your favorite RPG?
I like a lot of skill. What, role playing game?
Yeah. What's your favorite role playing game?
I don't know.
Come on.
Pick one. Skill based game. I don't know.
No. What setting?
No, your favorite role playing game. What's your favorite role playing game?
I haven't played enough to really know.
Oh, okay.
Well, how many have you
What
played?
was your favorite when you in the last 30 years that you remember fondly?
That I remember playing, either Call of Cthulhu 5th Edition or Cyberpunk 2020.
Okay.
Okay, this is what you do. You open up those books and you read the first page of each of those books and see how they define what role playing is.
Aren't
Because
they
that's
all
what a
really
new
similar?
player is going to read. A new player is going to read that and say, "Oh, that's how role playing's done." And if it's written poorly, then they're going to role play poorly. If it's written well, they're going to
I know
role play
exactly
well.
what he's saying, because my actual first introduction to role playing was Aberrant. That was the first book that I actually read, and they described what the game actually was. And so, but then I read that, and I could never get anybody to play White Wolf, like a White Wolf system with. But
Really?
I got third edition. Yeah. Then I got third edition, and it was more of the board gamey stuff that the guys that I was, friends with wanted to play. So, but I approached role playing in more of a White Wolf way than actually, just being on board with what D&D is all about. So, yes, I would say that it completely influenced the way that I kind of approach D&D, just from reading that source material outside
if
of
you read old school essentials or Osric or basic fantasy or any of those kind of games, the word role play is not mentioned in the book at all.
Right.
So how are you gonna explain how to role play in those games to anybody? They might say your class is the role of a character, whatever. The class is the role that you play in the game. That's about as close as role play is defined in those games. And players are like, okay, so I'm a class. I got to make a class. Which one do I pick? And then you read the next rules section. And it says, now that you have your class, this is how you move during combat. Okay, so now we're in combat. We do combat in this game. Where's the role play part? When is that talked about? If you're lucky, you got someone called the caller who decides for the whole entire group what the whole entire group's going to do. That helps speed up the game when you have 30 players at the table. One person talks to the dungeon master.
Maybe I don't want to play role playing games then, because it just seems to me. Look, I want to play like watching TV. I'm watching TV. I'm watching an episode of Star Trek. That's what I want the game to be. I want people to act like they're in Star Trek. I want people to act like they're in the A-Team.
Yeah, me too. I like the 60s Star Trek, and here's a trick here's a trick. Here's a trick. Well, this works with Star Trek though. Star Trek 60s. Listen to an episode from the 60s episodes, and just listen to it. Don't watch the show, but just listen to it, and you know what's going on in the episode, because it's like a audiobook.
I'm gonna
all the characters are saying where they're at and what they're doing.
I'm gonna say something, because if we're talking about new GMs getting into a game, just do it. That's the big thing. If you want to get in there, is because you're not going to be Critical Role. You're not going to be any of these.
Critical Role.
No. Here's the reason I'm mentioning Critical Role is you have a bunch of voice actors that are all doing this. You have a lot of stuff
that have done it 100,000 times before.
Well,
Critical Role is a sitcom almost with dice.
Well,
that's all.
Yeah, but my
it's a radio show with dice.
Is that's what people think when they're going in, and if you're the GM, you're not going to be there anyway, and that's going to turn you off. We're talking about people want to play games, and at the end of the day, then we're saying, well, we'll go like Sauter said, it took you a long time to get to that level.
What does the new? Okay, I would ask the new GM. Yeah. Okay, let's say they want to be a new GM. I would ask them, what do you want to GM? What kind of a role play game do you want to GM? What do you want to do as the GM for your group? Do you want to facilitate the game? Do you want to tell a story to your players? Do you want to just sit there and be the referee and say when rolls need to be made just from listening to what the characters are doing in the game? Or do you want to make maps all day and make dungeons and make NPCs and characters and small little towns and make encounter tables left and right for everything?
Well, some people enjoy doing all of that aspect. But I'm saying,
I would find out from the new GM what they want. What's their plan? What's their goal?
Well, I'm saying if we're going to try getting people to go into this, especially for sci-fi games, just do it. Is my whole thing. It's the whole idea of we're trying to like
Oh,
because
okay.
yeah,
Then the question is, okay, what kind of sci-fi do you watch or read?
yeah,
What's your favorite sci-fi?
Yeah.
And then you
yeah.
point them to I would just right on the spot. I would just do a practice session with that person, just
Yeah,
so they get the role play. After they know the role play aspect,
Yeah.
then they can go in the game stores and on Amazon and drive through and look
And
for the game
Shauner is
mechanic that might be interesting to them.
and
Some
Shauner's
people like rolling
absolutely
lots of dice.
yeah. Shauner's absolutely right though. There are a lot of systems that are RPG systems that almost don't talk about role playing at all. And so some of us have like cross game experience that
Sure.
lets us kind of bridge that gap.
And
So
I would
yeah,
also add to that, find something that is as rules light as possible for
the beginning
both
for
new
sure.
players and
Yeah.
DMs, because
Well,
I've seen, like for example, in Bruce's game, he's got a brand new player playing Pathfinder.
I'm just
I know,
as
I see that,
Painful.
Kevin.
Yeah.
It's
well,
so rules intensive that you know
well, and
it just
how are you
wouldn't have
going to get
been
your
my recommendation.
how are you going to get your players to join that if you can't explain the rules in about 10 or 15 minutes?
Okay. When I was a kid
Yeah.
and I didn't know any better, this is what I would do. I would, after school, ride my bike to the game store and see what new RPGs they have. And I would look only for setting. I was only interested in the setting of the game box, the art on the game box, the size of the game box, how heavy the game box was. Oh, we're getting this, we're going to play this. And we buy it, we open it up, it's got the dice, it's got the books inside, everything. We're all excited. And we spend hours reading the books and figuring out how it's played. But the main thing was we wanted to play the setting.
Yes.
That's how players in my schools and neighborhoods got interested in was the setting.
Yeah.
No one cared about how the game was actually run or how it works. And it would just end up being a
Exactly.
mediocre game session, rolling dice, scratching our heads, figuring out if we're doing it right, trying to figure out what the rules say here because they're ambiguous. But it was the setting. It was the
That's
setting.
exactly how I got my group to start playing Gamma World. We'd been playing D&D for a while, and I saw Gamma World, and I'm like, oh my God, look at this cover. Look at this, this all the, possibilities. Who's shrink wrap. Had no idea what's inside it. You read the blurb on the back, and that should be enough right there.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah,
Connor said.
Ringworld. I wanted to play Ringworld, but I didn't read the books. I didn't know anything about it, and it was pricey at the time.
Yeah. I think that was one of the issues with 5th edition was that, like, I'm just surprised that so many new people came in from 5th edition because that and the 3rd edition books, too, they give almost nothing on setting because they want it to be like, oh, well, you need to get those books, too, I guess, or something like that. But really, it would have been a lot better if they would have put a little bit more of the, like in 3rd edition, the Greyhawk stuff, because they already had all the deities and that kind of stuff, pretty much like the main ones in there.
Well, Kevin, I agree with you on that whole thing, which is like Shauner's talking about, and I know that the chat keeps saying it's setting, not system, but the problem that I'm having, for a lot of this, and this is great, is for 5e, it does a lot of it doesn't do that. I mean, they put a lot of stuff in there with the expectation that you have 20 years of experience, or like perfect example is this new Dragonlance book that came out, showing this an example. No, a new GM would be better off getting the old Dragonlance from 1st edition so he could get that whole feel. And and that's the thing that I was trying to do with when we're talking, I'll use Traveler. The problem is that you have to get it. Okay, you got the edition, but look at the books for 2300. I like 2300 better than the typical Traveler setting. I don't like the Imperium setting. It just bugs the hell out of me. I don't like that.
Almost the only way to play 5th edition is to get the starter box. Like, if you are somebody that's played role-playing games before and you got the books, you're fine. But
Yeah.
if you're somebody that was like, well, I just want to dive into the books do not have a complete setting to actually play the game.
I'm gonna
That's one of my biggest gripes about the whole 5th edition product.
Well, I'm gonna say this much because we're trying to go for sci-fi. What is the easiest self-contained stuff for someone to buy that you would recommend?
Cepheus Engine.
Okay.
Cepheus Engine or Traveler. I mean, like it's basically the same thing.
Well, I meant all contained that. Hey, I can buy the starter set box and I can just go and run and play. I know there's a travel one. I haven't really reviewed that.
Yeah,
one.
I'm not really funny.
Next time. All right.
Okay.
Yeah,
no
I
problem.
got family stuff going on.
Okay.
I gotta take
All
care
right,
of.
Bo.
No problem. See you later.
But I'm asking because everyone's gone through stuff. Is when you look at it, the Cipher book is $70. And then now that's for to me that's a when you look at a core book, that's something you buy second. That's your second role playing game. That's not your first role playing game. So as a new DM, if you were going to go in, what are some of the games you would recommend that have a low learning curve, can get players to jump in and really feel like they're in that world? And sometimes, like Shauner's talking about, I would rather have a new player who doesn't know the rules because their character's going to act like as if they were there. Whereas a lot of times in other systems, players are min-maxing on what's the most optimal way of doing stuff. And I think that's part of the problem. So from a role-playing standpoint, and I'm going to use Aliens, I think one of the best ones for new characters. It's easy to get people in there. They know what they're kind of expecting, yet they don't. The rules are fairly simple. It's easy for the GM to explain them to players. It has all the handouts and cards. What other systems do you think would be good for players to hey guys, I just got this book. Do you want to go play it?
Right. The issue I have is that I kind of have a gap. Like I don't really know a lot of the games that have starter sets. Like this is where the only ones that I've really I haven't really gotten a starter set since 5th edition, and that's been almost like 9 years now or something like that. It's been a long time. But yes, I mean, if Traveler or Cepheus or a game that's similar to those has a starter set, I think that would be a great place to start.
Isn't that the Explorer's Kit or something like that you can buy? And the other thing is you want something that's also supported. I don't know how it is with you guys, but I didn't see Traveler in any of the game stores until 2008 when I went to a major big city. When I was a kid, it was all basically like for example, when Shauna was talking about Shadowrun. All it was D&D mixed with Cyberpunk. And while I saw Cyberpunk, Shadowrun is still more influential, I think, in many cases. That's
the only real sci-fi game that I like in the shops that I used to go to that was Rifts. But I'll tell you, none of the Palladium stuff had any kind of intro. Like that was all very, jump into the deep end of the pool and get through the.
Palladium was like a game meant for people who'd already played a lot of RPGs, I think. It kind of assumed that you'd already played a bunch of games, or at least something.
The only other thing would have been 40K. Like they had some roleplay products, and they're kind of interesting, but again, they're kind of like you have to know a whole lot about 40K, or you have to do a ton of reading of like a big thick book and to just get a little taste of what it is, like what the world is. But playing the game, I mean, their percentile system, it's not that complicated to actually play the game once you get the things that your characters can do.
I'm thinking about your question still about the new GM who wants to do a sci-fi game.
Yeah.
So in the back of my brain, I'm thinking of role-playing games that are easy on the brain, easy on the eyes. Players can digest it pretty quick, and it does sci-fi. And maybe Sean Cherry might know more about this than me, but I want to say there's Savage Worlds You buy that, you buy the core book, and then you buy the sci-fi book for it. I want to say that should be enough to do everything.
Okay.
And it's mainstream, and it's in the stores, and it's in print.
One
people are
thing I
playing
wanted
it.
to add to that, though, Bo, with Traveler, while it does, kind of push its Imperium setting, it's child's play to just forget that stuff and just do your own thing, which I think the sooner GMs get into that habit, the better. Making your own setting or world or what have you is, for me, that's what I love about game mastering the most, is making something out of nothing, just taking some paper and making a world, making a setting, and just running with it with all the little things that I want to tailor make it, to, like I always say, to run a game that I'd want to actually play in if somebody else would run it for me, but I know they're not gonna. So this is the closest I'm gonna get, is by making a game world setting that I can't wait to play, even though I'm repping. I know Shauner thinks that I am playing it, but there are some faux pas that you can accidentally commit when not doing it properly. I've been in a lot of games where the GM's Uber NPC was just the end all be all, and it's really hard for some people to not do that, or not be perceived as doing that. So
okay, so I'm looking right now, and
I want to say, though, that a new GM who really wants to be a GM is going to be the person making the maps. And they're going to be in Traveler making their own world from scratch and ignoring whatever setting the game has. And they're going to just make their own setting.
It is literally easier to do that, Shauner, wouldn't you say?
It's way easier. It is 100% easier to make your own world from scratch that you can think up on your own without any help. You already have an idea when you thought you were going to run a game for somebody, so you make that world right there. It's easier to do that from scratch than to read all the lore for the Third Imperium and try to keep track of it all.
I'm going to say, I'm not disagreeing with you on that, but really most players are going to be I'm going to use the example of Star Wars. I want to play Star Wars. That's what I see in there. Same thing with the Expanse. They don't have to know everything. And in many cases, I don't know about you all, sometimes I enjoy getting the book because it has all these little details that I don't have to dig into buying everything else. Like the Alien book has a lot of stuff. Yeah. And the old Appendix N, hey, if you want more detail, go read this.
But that's you, though. That's you. We're talking about your new GM friend.
Well, my new GM friend is probably like I was as a kid. And what he wants to do is he walks in and he will create stuff later on, but he wants everything right there that he can just go and play at the start. And I'm looking right now, right? The Traveler Explorer.
Okay, so because in theory, a new person doesn't even know what a GM is. They've never heard of GM. They've never heard of Dungeon Master. They've never heard of Referee. They go to Barnes & Noble. They see this book saying something like, create your own worlds and adventures and have fun with your players in this adventure you create in your own mind. They open the book. Later on in the book, they find out, one of the players is like the Game Master. That's interesting. So what do they do? There's like a whole freaking half of the book is for the GM only to read. That player, that's when the player finds out that there's such a thing as a GM.
That's when the player finds out
born
under running the game and not playing it.
If they're born under a rock or something.
Well, even those who aren't it is somewhat intimidating to create your own world, and people tend to do it on their own anyway after they understand the system. But I just saw this, and I guess they dropped the price. The Traveler Explorers Edition is only $20 for the book and PDF. Cool. That is exactly the stuff. It's just like the D&D was $20.
Oh, the Explorer. I got the Explorer PDF for $1. Is it still $1 on drive-thru?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's on the Mongoose website. It's 99 cents.
Yeah. It has two characters. It has two of the characters from the game. That's enough to do planetary exploration. get your feet wet. And then a month later, Mongoose will email you for a discount on the core rulebook.
Oh,
If
really?
you got the 99-cent book.
Okay.
Really? That's a
Yeah,
pretty
so you
sweet
save
deal.
money. So you save money.
Yeah, work
But-
that
And
marketing.
I
let's
already
not forget-
had the
let's not
book.
forget-
I already had the book, so I couldn't save it.
Yeah, let's not forget Donner's actually in that book. Are you not?
I'm not in the newest book.
So,
They changed the animal chapter, so I'm not in that book. The 2022 book.
Well, and the
checked,
great,
you're in my copy. You're in my copy. So
I'm in the 2016 print.
Okay.
I'm in the
that what that is?
2016, not the 2022.
well, here's the other thing too is on a 99-cent. Like you're talking about. If you're the GM, you want to get your friends, you can spend $5 and send them everything so they're ready to go. That's the other part that comes into it is, but yeah, I'm not saying that any of that is bad. I just think that the problem that we have in a lot of these newer RPGs for science fiction is they aren't doing the. I guess
that's the one I have.
Yeah, they aren't doing the starter sets that they need to get to suck people in. But that's what I'm going to use is the word. I want to suck them into my world, give it to them. I want to give them a taste and a teaser so they want more. And they don't have to know all the, as much as we talk about Star Wars, you only have to watch the first movie and say, I want to play Star Wars, the old D6. And then you look at the old, the GDW.
West End Games.
Yeah, the West End Games. You look at it's got all the pictures, it's got this, and you go, oh, it's from the movie. I feel like, and it might have little details that weren't in the movie that are in the, and you're like, oh, it's also a resource book. So even if I'm not playing it, I still enjoy it. It's a that, and so they don't feel that way. It's hard to get someone into a completely new system that they've never played or not familiar with, and then like you said, is the artwork is what sucks them in, and
yeah,
so that's why I love Star Frontiers, and the fact that Star Frontiers died always made me sad compared to everything else, because at the time they just didn't have the starter sets they did for other things. But how many games can we think of? We've got Traveler, we have an out of print Star Frontiers. What are some other ones that we can mention for that is easily affordable, where someone doesn't feel like you said, $50 is a fair amount of money, and to expect someone to do that for sight of two is asking a lot.
Every sci-fi game is on drive-through.
Well, the officially licensed Fantasy Flight Star Wars, the Genesis engine is actually kind of cool, and I think it does work for space opera. But the problem is again, they didn't have any kind of real introduction, and they did have a little bit of PDF product intro stuff, but then it was they had their dice, and the dice are a mess unless you're using them on a virtual tabletop that just kind of gives you the results instead of you having to work it out. But the system itself is pretty cool, but I think they just hid it under a rock basically. I didn't hear anything about it in mainstream stores or anything like that. It was just kind of fly in the night, and it was kind of weird to me because that's such a big property, and it just kind of got ignored.
I mean, I'm trying to
Barnes & Noble sold that book.
Yeah,
I mean, I've seen,
but not the game stores so much.
Well, and that's the other part is most of the people who are going to get this stuff are not going to go to a game store to find it. They're going to go to their local Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or whatever's out there for that, or Walmart or Target. And that's where people can get it. And okay, so there is a starter set apparently for Edge of the Empire Star Wars.
Okay.
I'm trying to look for it. I'm not seeing a price, which always gets me. Guys, you should at least give the MSRP. The fact that the Traveler one's $20, most people are like, hey, I found something cool. Why don't you look at this? Okay, $20. You don't feel like that's a big investment. You don't feel like you're losing anything.
That Star Wars book is going to be pretty complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, this is what it says. It says 48 plus 32 pages. So right here it says a 32-page adventure book, a 48-page rule book. Okay, that seems pretty good. And
so they've got a They've got a Edge of the Empire beginner game for $30.
Okay, so
And
that's
I'm looking at this on Fantasy Flight's actual website. It's probably direct.
Come on, Bomber Brother.
what
No.
That's where he went.
well, but that's but and it comes with the custom
I
dice.
unplugged myself.
Oh no. But it comes with custom dice and tokens. So to me, this seems like it's perfect. Now I don't know what it's actually running, but that's what's going to get your players in there. And everyone knows Star Wars, so they're going to start off with Star Wars, whether you like it or not, because I think you can find people to do that.
Oh, by the way,
Well,
am I
have
the
them
only
go-
one who notices the quantum
them-
shield watermark in the corner?
Yeah, we talked about that. I have no idea why that's there.
Yep.
I hope I'm not streaming on his channel.
I think you are. That's where
think
I
you are.
looked at. That's where I went to find this.
No, it's in the brand tab on your StreamYard.
Yeah, but sorry, somebody was talking about something, and
But the before you guys go doodling off to buy your Star Wars games, check them out. Watch Star Wars games being played on YouTube first, and see if it's your
don't do that.
if it's your piece of cake.
Don't do that.
I'm going to say something.
They are the longest slogs to watch through. They don't sound at all like audio books, and they're painful. They're painfully slow.
I'm going to say this much: is almost every playthrough I watch by everyone is a slog, and it takes effort to get.
Yeah, that's why this hobby is still kind of like for nerds.
Well, this
After
is
4 years.
I can think of one that's actually pretty excellent. Rick,
One
the issue
out
about-
of
that
hundreds of thousands.
think
the
about.
issue,
Yeah,
They
I
should-
did write a bunch of notes here for Bo,
Sure.
but and it's more practical. It's not really system, like it's meant for everybody that's ever considering game mastering. So, I mean, if you guys want to hear it, but
Sure.
Absolutely.
Why do you guys?
do it.
Why do you guys have hats on? Is there something happening? Is there something I should be
Yes.
aware of? Is
we're
Is
part
there
of the
preeminent
bomber
danger?
brigade.
Yeah.
Rick sent that hat to Jackie.
Oh, I thought you were preparing for atmospheric decompression on Earth or something.
No, just Rick is that kind of guy, and just blew Jackie away with a surprise out of nowhere
The
gift.
two these are the two guys from The Thing. That's what they're doing. They're in the Antarctic, right?
This was
Trying-
the last
The
thing
Creedies.
I was expecting. Yeah. Also, I think I might have a brain disease. So if my voice breaks up randomly, it's that.
Oh,
Brain
it's not.
disease?
It's not the thing.
No, it's not the thing. It's definitely not the thing.
No,
It's,
it went into his eye and then behind his eye and then ate through his brain.
yeah.
It's that. I've had that.
So let's hear some notes there, Rick, because
So
I
yeah,
had a couple too.
so if you're deciding getting into game mastering and you need to prepare something, this is kind of my notes to prepare. So what I do is I concentrate mainly on NPCs. So the first thing is create a bunch of NPCs for yourself as a game master to emulate through this situation that you're going to have your players go through. So you have to have motivations, what they love, what they hate, stuff. That includes monsters. That includes, like organizations, stuff like that. You have to have all those things kind of put in notes for yourself, so you can kind of keep yourself in track. And listen, because when it comes down to as you're playing in the game, you want to be the NPC that describes something or brings up a little bit of exposition. He goes, yeah, I've been to that star. I know about that star. There's like these floating objects around there, and all kinds of weird stuff. People go in there and get lost in the junk debris fields around there and stuff like that. You want to have NPCs that you can, have that sort of, interaction with, and get creative with your NPCs. and use their likes and dislikes and stuff like that. And as far as your cadence as a game master, listen to a lot of the old, like Jack Vance and stuff like that. Listen to the old audibles, and that way you get that kind of radio show kind of feel to the way that you're describing stuff, because the way they describe stuff in those novels, it's not in huge detail or anything, but it's just
Right.
enough detail that you can get everybody's brains working on that imagination, imagining stuff. It's much better for you to describe a monster, in details of scales and stuff like that, or the teeth and the froth coming from its mouth, and letting the players' brains bring up the most horrible thing that they can imagine themselves, because no, ma- no matter what kind of picture you put in front of them, their brain is going to be the best, uh, bringing up of their most dire fears and stuff like that. Um, Once you got that, uh, go ahead and put together a situation, and then just let it fly. Let it all come naturally. You're gonna have your NPCs ready to, voice in when you want to, and you have the situation unfold, and it could be anything. Like I say, it could be like we're all getting together to go ahead and rob this ship. We're all pirates, and this is the goal. So we have the ship off at one location, and you're flying towards it, and you put them into that situation. You might have, instead of a player flying the ship, having an NPC flying the ship, and asking for directions from the captain, which is one of the players or something like that, and just let it flow naturally. It could end up being everybody kills each other on the ship before they even get to the ship that they want to rob, or whatever. It's going to happen the way it's going to go, and just let it happen.
Can I say one thing though? Maybe this is just for me. Ham it up, have fun, just go
That's
all
right.
the way, and don't hold back. The worst thing that can happen to you is players laugh, and if they're laughing, they'll probably play with you again just to watch you go completely off the rails.
Yeah.
And everyone, they're overacting. It's okay. That's what you want to watch. You want to be magnetic. You want to have fun with it. You want to be, I am the if anyone watched Blackadder and Flash.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And if anyone's watched Blackadder and Flash comes down and he's like, oh, they're going through. He's like, well, tell a bunch of women, blah blah blah, and then I made it home safely. Before they all kill themselves, and players will remember that, even if it's over the top. Now, okay, it's a little bit different. You're playing a horror game, but do that. That makes it a lot of fun. Use accents. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to make yourself a fool. And if you're, but just overdo it in certain cases, and like, aha, I'm going to do this. And that's if you're going to be more of the, how do I want to say this? You don't want the horror setting, but if you want the action adventure stuff, that's fine. If people want to watch the Errol Flynn, or my favorite, of course, is Brian Blessed in Flash. When he comes over and wherever he is, he just he sucks the room out for a lot of everyone else around him. And the same thing happened with Max von Sydow. Have fun with it, and I think that's part of the. How do I want to say this? If you're going to do a horror game like Alien, it's a bit different. Okay, well, we all know how that feels. But the same thing is, if you're going to play a Flash Gordon Savage Worlds, like Shauna was talking about, go whole hog, ham it up. If anything, sit your place down and watch a movie before you're going to play that gets everyone in the right mindset.
I was going to say, I think what you're saying is play to the genre. But
make it fun. If it's fun, players want to come back and go, oh man, if like Shadows talked about it, where everyone talked about it for the next week, man, we can't wait to play. Oh, it was hilarious when you did this. And I think that's part of the hard part is everyone's self-conscious. Man, players are very forgiving. I think that players are very forgiving, because they want if they want to play, they really do want to play, and they're willing to overlook all your mistakes. If it's fun, they'll keep coming back. It may not be like, well, I wanted this experience, but it was so much fun, I'll just keep coming. So, yeah. So I go ahead there, 28 millimeter. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I already went through all my notes, and I'm just kind of giving practical, what you should prep for. And like I said, NPCs very important, and you do have control factors in your sci-fi, because say for example in Traveler, you don't have to have the players in an actual starship that travels to stars. You can start them off in just like a ship's boat kind of rocket, like a ship that would only go within the system, and adventure around the system. They can go to this system's version of Mars, this system's version of Saturn, and encounter things on different moons and stuff like that. Or it could be like multiple stars in the same system, like Firefly, because it's got like 3 stars that you can go to, and you can do all kinds of stuff, different kinds of worlds. Don't always have your worlds as this is the sand world, this is the rock world, this is the cold world, this is the jungle world. You can mix it up. Like, Earth has various different, temperatures and climates and stuff like that. And use
my book idea, man.
Weather. What's that?
I said you're killing my book theories idea, man.
But remember,
he is obsessed with the idea of, so what if there's a world and it's like all ice, and there's another world and it's like all
sure, you can have that. You can have the the Vin Diesel, what's his name, Riddick, world where it gets baked on one side and cools off on the other as it's turning. And it's just a cool aspect that you can bring into a game. Among the jailbreak that you're having the players go through, in this other aspects coming through. But there's different things as a game master that you control, and you control how the ship performs, whether or not it breaks down or not, and stuff like that. You
mean
also
when it blows up, Connor?
Well, the kind of games I do with Traveler are like Blade Runner, where you're just on the same world in the same city doing city stuff. You're probably never going to see space travel.
That actually is essentially not my entire philosophy for this kind of stuff, because a lot of my stuff is like intergalactic and whatever. But I feel like people neglect the opportunities which you can have on just one or two worlds. I mean, people seem to think that once you get to the scale of several planets, that like the larger the scale, of course, individual planets become less important, but that doesn't mean that planets aren't as big as planets are, regardless of how many planets you can access. Just because you have access to as many planets as you want, each one is still as big as a planet would be that can hold life, or even if it can't and it's super small, like Mars or something, or Pluto, you can still do a lot of stuff there. And the idea that you have to be like, you have these super fast ships that can go from one side of the galaxy to the other to do all your stuff is, you can do that. There's no problem with doing that. Many people have done it successfully, but it's missing out on an opportunity that it's an untapped market.
I'm gonna bring up a little bit different, which is, even when you're traveling from world to world, you still are only generally going to go from space station to space station, or you're going to have your core. So you're still limiting your locations, even if it's on multiple worlds, because most of the time they're not exploring everywhere. I mean, if we all want to talk about Buck Rogers, if you remember the old stuff, that the old 70s series, do you remember that while they went in there, it was generally the city and maybe wherever they were going from point A to point B. But the one time that he goes outside the city, remembering how they had all of we never really explored Earth for the most part. There was a little bit there, but not a lot. And
Earth was nuked.
Yeah, and they had the mutants outside of it and things like that. Well, the same thing happens with You can go outside of there if you want, but most of the time, I'm just going to use what I've seen for Traveler. The ship is not going to go to the ground in most cases. It may sometimes, but even then it's going to go to a spaceport, and then it's going to come back up and leave, and the same thing with Serenity.
Mm-hmm.
So you have your base core. I think we were talking about this earlier. You have your base core ship, which is where people are very familiar with, and I like the aspect of Traveler where the quirks on the ships that they have. That is adding those little quirks in there. And a perfect example is for anyone that's watched the Millennium Falcon, where it breaks down every so often at the most inopportune times. You don't have to give them the great ship. The ship becomes its own character by itself. Mm-hmm. And then when they go to the space station, if they're making different runs between them, you can begin to set that up. The other thing is, it's better to throw players, especially if they're trying to learn a new game system, throw them into action at the very beginning. All right, guys, here's what we're going to do. You're going to understand what do you want to do for combat? Okay, we're going to roll this. We're going to do that. Now, just that's what was the great thing from Star Wars at the very beginning, which was unlike anything I'd seen before. All of a sudden, you see the ship going, and there's another one firing, the lasers at it, and then the Star Destroyer comes over and picks it up, and they come in. That's great for a movie for getting you in. All too often, you're kind of waiting for things to happen. But Star Wars starts off with a bang at the very beginning.
I always start my games with combat or something. Yeah. Something horrific's happening at the beginning of my games.
And really just also remember as a new GM that things don't have to be complicated. Like a few story elements like that people can hold on to, like 2 or 3 things to think about, plot, subplot, maybe a couple of character interactions, and then it's about the combat or about whatever the kind of combat and whatever kind of role-playing system that you're doing. Like with Cthulhu, it's not so much combat, but it's like, getting into things and finding things and stuff and running away, lots of running away.
Remember that episode?
You don't need too many layers of things going on.
Remember Enterprise? There was one season where they decided to do a campaign for the entire season instead of being episodic. They decided to the Borg or some alien race or whatever decided to cut into Florida.
Cindy, yeah.
Yeah, it took a piece of Florida off the map, and Trip's sister lived there. So that was reason enough to go after these bugs, these insect things for the rest of the season. But I liked how the season started with freaking Florida getting destroyed. Millions of people gone.
Shocker.
And
Nice.
Like you said, is if you can just suck them in, and make it. As much as I talk about sometimes is you have big world scan, and then you have very individualistic, but even just the descriptions. This is one thing when you were talking about the Dying Earth. Okay, you know what? Dying Earth is not written at a 7th or 8th grade level. One of the best things you can do is read it, go look at it, and start incorporating some of the language in there. And the reason I mention that is if you can use just 3 or 4 words instead of trying to go through a paragraph, and just so it doesn't have to be perfect, like you were talking before about, it doesn't have to be perfectly descriptive. But if I start saying, there's, the rainbow colors of the sky, you're just like, oh, okay. And every player may have it a bit different, but the sunset is, is a crimson hue as it sets right before, and as the sun comes down, you get the green flash. Suck the players into that. That's one of the things that people like, really, what's that green flash? Oh, it actually does occur. My favorite thing for Star Wars is, while we're talking about all the battle scenes, is when Luke is standing up there and he sees the 3 moons in the sky. I don't have to describe, this one's a gibbous and this one is a crescent, and you
let them use their own imagination.
Exactly.
Suck them in that way. It's just paint. You want to paint the picture of what they see, but you don't want to be so descriptive. So let their imaginations run it the same. Especially if you're ever doing a horror game, players' imaginations will go places that are far better than if you had actually shown everything. That's and even the original Alien is because you didn't know what you were encountering. That's what all horror movies do is you don't see everything. Everything's
Right.
kind of in the shadow. You don't know what to expect.
Do
Yeah,
a
that's
few
like, that's
things-
yeah, that's why I like the audible versions, because it's like this guy's describing stuff. I'm like, and when we get older, we tend to learn by example a little bit more than reading from text and stuff like that. We kind of tend to do that when we get older. It's kind of like
So-
teaching a guy to play guitar. He's
Yeah.
going to learn by you showing chords when he's older. Where as a child, they're more apt to be more technical about it and read about it and all that stuff.
Right.
Well,
So do limit the things that you're doing if you're a new GM. Do them well. Make them things that people want to remember, want to learn more about. That's like my biggest piece of advice. Because if you try and complicate it, it muddies the waters. Make things very, very clear.
And if you're a big
because
if you're a big rules person, go with what makes sense in the game first and stop worrying as much about the rules. The rules don't have to be perfect. The players don't have to know the rules. If you screw up on the rules, it doesn't matter if they had a fun and awesome time. Don't be afraid to make mistakes or make rulings and come back like, oh, okay. No, it is hard to. I remember when I was a kid, I was a rules lawyer up to the nth degree. And part of that just came down to I didn't trust the DM. And that's the other part is be fair to the players, give them the excitement that they crave and things like that. And this is one thing that I'm not quite dealing with as much, but I noticed that my friend's wife, she likes to do the role playing, how do I want to say, shopping expeditions, things that I don't really care about that much, but she enjoys that. Let me go to the store, let me talk to the merchant, let me do this. Okay, run with that. Find out what each player likes and cater towards it in that aspect. And what you'll find out is
this is what you do. She likes to go shopping. This is what you do. She goes shopping, and you narrate the things she sees in the store to make her think if her character's going crazy or not.
Well, it's the.
Then at least it's interesting for you that she's going shopping. And it's interesting for her character. Like, am I imagining that I'm going crazy? Did I really see a severed something or else on the butcher shop in the meat market? Did I really see anti-gravity stuff that shouldn't exist in this timeline? Did I really see the back end of the merchant store is open to the void, the vastness of space? And there's Langoliers out there eating time that's spilling out into it.
I'm gonna say one thing. You're laughing, but that's called Numenera.
God damn, I missed you.
I've been trying so hard to get Shawner into Numenera, but
I'll be honest. Numenera was.
But the other thing
Go ahead.
the other game setting I use a lot in Traveler is the Minority Report.
Oh.
I love the Lexus cars auto driving around to people's houses, and the chase scenes, and the unreliable narrator. I love that in stories. So the players don't know exactly what's going on. So it's right in front of their face, but the way I narrate something, it makes them think like, what's really going on? And I steal those ideas from the Book of the New Sun.
Oh, and don't be afraid if your players come up with a better idea to incorporate it and head that direction.
Oh yeah. I steal from my players.
Yeah.
All the time.
It's if you say, oh, they're going to go here and it's going to go this direction, and then they start coming up with all of their ideas. They're trying to think it, and they're going this way. One is it can make the players feel like, oh, we're really smart, we got it. But the other one is go, you know what? You have better ideas. I'm going to steal it. I'm going to use that right now, and you yeah, don't be afraid to change things.
Okay, a real basic thing would be, okay, your friend's character goes shopping, they're at the market, and terrorists show up, and they threaten to nuke the building across the street. Is your friend's character going to stay shopping, or are they going to evacuate with everyone else, or are they going to grab a gun and be Ridley Scott, or Ripley, you know, just
Ripley.
or Sarah Connor or whatever,
Yeah.
and take matters in her own hands. I don't know what kind of character she had, but
I also think if you're going to be a new GM, just really the setting, just draw them in. And one of the best things to do is sights and smells and the feeling. You know, if you suddenly go over and say you can feel the oppressive humidity under the bright sun that you have to squint your eyes, and you smell the sewage coming up from around you. Okay, it's just like, okay, I can imagine being that. But you know what? That's kind of the Middle East. If anyone's been there, you know, in some of these war zones, that draws the players in, and especially, you know, the sounds of you hear the merchant over there hawking along with the clucking chickens as he goes over, and then you hear one do it right before you hear the what is it, the hatchet come down on its head with the sick, you know, like, okay, you know, we can all imagine that, and we know kind of the world that we're in now. You know,
that's one thing Bruce Lombardo is really good at, is exactly what you just said. The sounds, and especially the smells. You get some sort of perverse kick out of really, you know, going in there. I guess you watched that one episode of MASH just a few too many times, but he'll really go into that. I try to do that myself, but I haven't, you know, GM'd in a while. So hopefully this year that'll be one of the things that I'm gonna really try to incorporate.
Well, it's just like whenever you walk into the forest. If I come over and say, you feel the coolness in there, you can hear the babbling brook and the smell of honeysuckle. You look down and you see the lichens and moss around the tree, and the weather's beginning to turn, so you can tell that it's going from summer to fall.
Yeah.
so Omanal,
about all
where are you
you
getting that from?
What the
How are you able to do what you just did?
I walk outside.
Where did you learn that from?
I walked outside and I would wander around. You know, I'm going from some of my.
You don't remember it from a book or anything, or a famous writer that you like, their style of writing, or you saw a movie, or.
Well, some of those things are, but really, every time I do it is when I'm visualizing. I visualized when I was 6 years old, and my favorite things of where I used to go pick the little the center of the honeysuckle, and we used to dab it on our tongue. So I've always loved the smell of honeysuckle, and of course there was a little creek or brook around there. And then I took it from another area, which is the lichens, like around where my parents live. And that's the other thing: is a DM, get outdoors. Go explore your world. Get away from the city.
Yep.
What if you're Winston Smith? Remember Winston Smith's childhood that he would remember?
But here's the other thing: is if I go over and I, you know, like I remember in Chicago, you know, going over there, is I said, okay, you can hear the L in the background, you can smell the urine around you, and the rotting garbage. I'm like, okay, that's a lot of big city stuff.
Yeah.
In the meantime, you see one of the largest raccoons you've ever seen in your life as it's going through, and it gives you this nasty look. You're like, all right, I'm leaving you alone. And they have rats.
Okay, so what generally happens after you do your narration like that? What's the next thing that happens?
Oh, well, my hope is
after you describe the setting.
Well, I want them to feel that they were that way, and then I know that you
Is
don't.
there a lot of screaming and crying and dying soon afterwards?
No, because I would like the players now to tell me what they're going to do. What would you
do? The players wake up and their characters are frozen and they're being told all this through memory grams or something?
No, it's usually, hey, you get off, you know, you step outside of whatever the subway, and now you can hear someone strumming things. I want to describe them I want them to tell me what they want to do, and then I want to describe the world around them.
I guess my question would be, how much narration do you do before the players say what they do?
Oh God, it's been a long time since I've done some of the DMs. I usually just try throwing them in there. The last example is Conan. Okay, you can smell the sea spray as you're below decks, and you're and you can smell the bilge coming up in your sweat as you've been in there, and the manacles are around you are starting to rub raw on your skin.
Okay, stop. That's all you have to say.
Yeah,
that's when the players say what they're doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Otherwise, you're telling a story, and the players are just kind of like, okay, waiting for the die roll to be asked for.
No, actually, not that it's the best, and I know that you wouldn't want to play with them, but I like playing with my friends, regardless of what's going in there, and say, okay, what would you guys like to do? Or what, that's, I want to, and then sometimes, I know from a player standpoint, how I am is I'll interrupt the DM and say, this is what I want to do in the middle of that. And so then we can go through it. But some people, to be fair, kind of are like,
okay.
They're real passive.
So when you ask the players what they want to do, that reminds me of earlier when you were asking what someone who wants to learn how to GM should do.
Yeah.
That's when you ask them. Instead of asking them, what do you want to do? You say, what do you want to GM? What game do you want to run?
Yeah.
So you're kind of like getting them to think. I don't know, I'm just experimenting, but earlier you were talking about the GM and how.
But it's a good analogy.
Interested. Like you want your players to do something, you want some new player to now start running a game, kind of a thing. Some sort of like lumping it all together into one big thing.
So maybe I've been blessed. I don't know how everyone else is, but the problem is what I hear online versus my personal experiences is normally there's about half or more of the players that I play with want to be GMs at some point. And so usually we'll be playing at a certain point in the game like, ooh, I have this really cool idea. We need to do this. And I went, well, the problem is that we're under this system. Can we keep a short campaign of maybe 7 or 8 sessions, where we can get a general storyline, and then we'll switch to whatever you want to do, and we'll do that for.
That's why I do. That's why I do shortcuts. I do very short one shots because I want the players to start running games on their own quickly. I don't want them to be locked into some campaign of mine, and then they have to move away, or they go to college, or they get married, or
have a kid.
And they don't ever get to run the game. I wanted them. The whole point of me teaching people how to roleplay is that they start running games, and then they teach people how to roleplay. That was my goal.
That would be ideal for me. I think sometimes though, is a lot of GMs are just kind of control freaks, and we kind of go around in circles. And so the idea is that was the one thing I did is for me personally, and this is what we're talking about is I like to run one shots. I like to see if I like the system. I like to see if the players like the system, and we go through it. And if they don't, guess what? They don't feel trapped. Next week it's something different. I started doing. This was right before COVID. Of course, it failed. I was trying to do one-shot Fridays. One-shot Fridays were easy. I made sure the adventure would stay about 4 hours long. I had a beginning and an end that I wanted to. I might fill it in between. And any more than 4 hours, I generally found didn't work. I didn't want to stay up that late. But I had a friend of mine. He said, I want to do a one-shot. And I got kind of frustrated because he wanted, it wasn't a one-shot. It wasn't a 3-shot. It was a whole campaign. And I went, look, I wanted something short so I could go from one world to another. That's the other part is I have world ADD. I know everyone talks about having these giant campaigns, but I'm happy playing one shot here and one shot there. And I want to experience all these different feelings and like you're saying, Shauna, this time, I sometimes want serials rather than the storyline. I just want to just one episode. We'll do an episode. Okay, next time we're going to be in something different, and it's a different system.
I'll do if a one shot works out really good, and everyone's still alive. Then maybe a week or two later, we'll do another one shot with the same characters. Just a whole different situation.
Before
good night.
Oh, sorry.
God bless.
Good night, buddy.
Go ahead.
No, I'm not leaving. I'm just saying good night to Grim.
Yeah.
The human is staying.
Me personally, before I did anything online, I just had the game that I was running, and people wanted to be in it. So my 3rd edition game went for 3.5 years. My 4th edition game, when I was in the military and I was in Virginia Beach, I still had a a regular group. We would get together at a gaming store, and I ran that game for almost 2 years. So I mean, that just was just because it was the game that I was running, and I did see other games and things, but it was just like, well, everybody wants to know what happens next week. So I just had people that were invested and wanted to be engaged in a long-term campaign pretty much every time.
And I agree with Shawners. If you go through it and they say, hey, you know what, we like to play again. I like to play the same characters. That's when you start shifting over to the campaign. Mm-hmm. But again, if people know it's going to be a one-shot initially, they kind of feel like there's no obligation. I think there's that stress and that was one of the things that I noticed with my friends who generally only played 5e. They were willing to try new systems. Again, the system had to be easy because they knew they weren't locked in. And because they aren't locked in, the only problem is that certain systems build up over time. A perfect example is Call of Cthulhu, which is your sanity slowly goes down. If you follow those rules, then they're never going to go insane, so it doesn't have as much impact. So a lot of the one-shots that I've been playing with Ye Old Geek and sometimes, they're really 3 shots. They take about 3 weekends for us to get through it. But we've had a lot of fun with doing stuff of that sort. But I don't feel obligated. Guess what? If I want to take a break or I want to go see my parents or anything else, it's not like, hey, man, we need you for this next adventure. Like, you know what? No, you guys can go play. I'll come back at a later time.
Since I've been playing online, like basically since Google Plus started being the way that it seems like a lot of role-playing gets done, I got all kinds of opportunities to come in and play one-shots. So I got to see how that was actually ran. And I guess for the new GM, what I would say is that like try and find some of those opportunities. There's lots of like little one-shot games that people want to play all the time. So like jump in there, get a little bit of an experience, like see how somebody else does it. And
Google used to have a one-shot group, and it was just one-shots people ran on Hangout.
Yeah, I mean, one-shots are absolutely a great way for new game masters to learn how to do it properly, because trying to get someone who is like the first time doing it, they haven't done it anything like it before. I mean, maybe they've played, but that's not. It prepares you, but it's not the same thing in any way.
I guess I would also say just have confidence. Like don't act like it's your first time.
Try to hide that it's your first time. That should be rule number 1, and make sure that nobody knows it's your first time.
No, I'm going to be different on that. It's
difficult.
Unless you know what I mean, of course.
I mean, if it's your best friends that you grew up with, it might not be so big of a deal. But like nowadays, with people playing online all the time, nobody wants to play with somebody that's never ran anything before.
For years, I wouldn't run a game because I thought I would not be able to memorize a game module, or I would look stupid reading from the game module. You're in room 12. It's 10 by 20.
That's fine.
It's a low ceiling, so you'll have to crawl through this room, okay? And okay, everyone do a perception checks for me, please. And it would just be it would be.
I'm gonna say something.
I highly doubt that. I mean, unless you're playing.
When I got rid of the screen, the GM screen, everything just worked because it was all in my head.
I'm gonna bring this up as well. Don't. I don't know. As long as you, I don't mind if someone says, "Hey, it's my first time. I'm trying to learn. Does someone mind helping me learn the system?" Okay, that sounds good. What I don't want is which is what I think is scaring a lot of people off, is they expect the Critical Role where you're going to have thousands of dollars of accessories.
That's a TV show with dice.
You and I know this, but I'm saying, like, my friend says he's met people that are like, oh, well, it has to have this, and it has to be like this, and he goes, no, there's no. But that's part of it.
They're playing Seinfeld or they're playing Friends. Only on occasion, a character will roll the dice to see if they're gonna be boyfriend or girlfriend with somebody or not.
Right.
And then they have to live with the role they made.
Well, to be fair, I'm basing it off of when Critical Role was new before they became overly scripted.
Like when they were in their house and stuff, and they were playing on their the dining room table.
It's a
Well,
little bit after
it was
that.
like it was like when they only had 2 cameras. They didn't have a lot of stuff. They were trying to
Yeah.
show. I mean,
Yeah,
When they were playing, when they played in someone's house, that was kind of cool because they were just playing like how the kids on Strange Worlds or Stranger Worlds or Stranger
Things.
Stranger
It was-
Things.
it was
They were
it was like
playing like that.
Yeah, it was like the first
way-
season for like the first 40 or 50 episodes. I enjoyed. After that, it was like no, but you know when they started getting all the sponsorships and everything else, you're like, oh, okay. Like you said, it's now watching almost this, something else.
Anybody that's ever GM before or DM before could sense when it went from actually being a D&D game to not being.
Their whole season is written out, and they play out each episode in a 4-hour show, and they ad lib some of the stuff, they pad it, but they have a general idea of what's going to happen in a game session.
Yeah.
And they make up the lines that they say on the spot, but they all know that they're all going down a rosy path on a railroad.
Right.
Like you said, it's at the beginning. I could tell that it was kind of fun and organic, and they were having fun with it. And it didn't, it was, hey guys, we're just trying to get like 5,000 subscribers. That was, I was like, oh, okay. That was.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and I said, oh, that was fun for it. But there was a certain point where I just felt like, it's not organic as much anymore. It's overly produced, which sounds funny. And it went from voice actors that were just having fun and being silly and saying, hey, you know what? We're going to be up on here to like, this is our full-time job. And once it became the full-time job, I went, all right,
Yeah,
typically when
like watching Days of Our Lives at that point.
Mm-hmm. Typically when things go from low production quality to high production quality, you can often tell that something is lost there. Not always, but a lot of the time.
It was the spontaneity that disappeared, and that spontaneity, a lot of it was not. That's what I mean. Is it how do I want to put this? Once it becomes overly produced or overly processed, you can feel that instead of it being natural, organic, of friends just sitting there having fun.
One thing I do like about their show is that it sounds like a radio show when you listen to it. Right. That's one thing I like about it.
They were doing some pretty decent role playing.
Yeah. And to be fair, they are voice actors. They should be. If you're not, and not everyone's going to be at that level. So just don't.
I don't want to hear players say in a radio show, "I attack it with my +2 sword."
Right.
I swing my sword at the danger ahead. I run up the stairs and I do my perception check. I don't want to hear that in a radio show.
Right.
They don't do that.
And this is the other problem that I have with it is, hey, I went up the stairs and I look around. That's what you should be saying.
Yeah.
And I don't want to hear the DM say, roll your perception.
I don't want to hear. Yeah. I don't want to hear the. Yeah, I don't want to hear the GM say that either.
Yeah, I would rather the GM just roll the perception, and so the players don't see it, even if I hear the dice in the background.
The entire concept of a perception check just drives me insane. Did you look over here? No. Then you didn't see what's over here.
Well, perfect example for me is I don't mind doing perception checks because it's like, to me, it's like when you listen at the, I'm going to listen at the door, in D&D,
right.
It's a D6 or whatever. Well, but tell me your action. And one is, I'm not going to have you roll a perception check to see if you see the key when you flip over the mattress and it's under the bed. Okay. You've already exposed that. If it makes sense, let them do it. I think the problem, and 5e doesn't even recommend this. If you actually read it, it says only roll when it's in doubt. And yet nowadays it's used as a default for an action.
Yeah, exactly.
And really,
well, now it's used for who's going to die next horribly. Everybody.
And
roll
really
for initiative. Everyone roll for perception.
You only need to roll if it's relevant.
Yes. That's what I mean. But it feels like in some cases, not that I hate it, but I remember when I was in 8th grade and the characters came up on some goblins. I was like, well, we're going to make goblins really tough. Why? Sometimes just let characters be awesome. You're wandering through the forest. You see a couple of goblins. Guess what? At the time, they were 10th level. They're first level goblins. I'm not trying to make a big encounter. They said, oh, well, I'm going to shoot them. All right. The first goblin goes down with 2 arrows in his back, and you shoot the third one through the neck, and he goes down. Okay. Now we're going to move on to the next thing. Sometimes you know where it's going to go. Not everything has to be a fight that slows the story down, but it also makes the characters feel like they're awesome. Oh, I am 10th level. I am awesome. I can go.
Yeah.
Fight. I think that's part of the other thing is
Well,
if it is. Okay, go ahead.
That's a whole other thing. Is if the players want to do the zero to hero adventure, I don't do those things. So my style
guys,
of roleplay won't even work with that probably.
Yeah.
I'm
turning it into
hero. I mean, they start at first level and they
You're turning
work
into
their
a
way
pumpkin.
Up. Oh, I'm sorry. but I mean,
you know what?
Yeah, go ahead.
It was great having you, Kevin. If you want to come back next week, I was just gonna pose this in front of everybody. I do have to get going too. If you guys want to come back and finish this, because I have like a whole bunch of things. It's not a whole bunch, but it's some things that nobody's mentioned, and I was really enjoying listening to you guys, except for you, Rick, because you were like quiet as a mouse tonight. I really like having you guys.
Well, I say things when it's relevant, you know.
He's in
I know.
Canada.
He only rolls when it's relevant.
It's polite to a fault. But if you guys would like to come back next week, the invitation's open.
Are you going to go to which is it that way? That thing over there? I'm on the opposite side, but still.
Yeah, I am. I have
We need to get rid of that. We're gonna get as you
And if you
as
wanna-
you like to put it, copy striked.
Yeah, and
up.
Shadow, if you want to put this link in on YouTube, that is the link to my Dig RPG.
You know what? I don't know how to do that.
We didn't look at.
From
So you
here.
just
Because I'm on a tablet.
okay. Well, it looks like Sun is of the Shadow and Sun is going to bail you out. So
Okay. Appreciate that.
Yeah. And sorry for cutting you off there, but yeah,
No.
I gotta get going.
It was wonderful seeing you again. Shauna just bailed on us, man. You see that? Not even a
Ran
not
away.
even an audio.
It's like a puff of smoke.
Dang.
Connor, it was really nice getting to hang out with you again. Sorry you had to wait like the first 10 minutes to get a word in edgewise, but like I said, guys, the invitation is open for this time next Saturday, maybe a little later because I got Bruce's game Saturday. Who knows how long that's going to be, but again, thank you everybody in the chat. This was a really fun show tonight. I really needed this. It's been like a week or two since I got to do one of these, and this was one of my favorites so far. Jackie, thanks for showing up. Kevin, Omen, Rick, you guys are the best. Shauner, goes without saying.
We need more of him.
Absolutely. And you know, some of you folks in the chat, we've never got to be in the show together, but hit me up on Discord and maybe we'll work something out and get to meet you guys in person too. Obviously, Sean Cherry, we've hung out before. You're always welcome as well. It just means Jackie's gonna have to sit next to his old man, which he hates because he loves having his own screen and stuff. But I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. I'm gonna make up some more notes for next week because this is like the perfect time, I think, to get out there and encourage new people to start GMing, because I know from personal experience, having been an eternal GM for 25 plus years, this year of gaming has been one. Well, no, I did play 25 years ago as a player, but this last year, getting to play in Rick's game and with Omen and in even Bo's game last night were some of the funnest games I've ever had.
Awesome.
You know, as a player, because you know I'm getting to play with people who really love the hobby, not just as players, but as GMs and players. Everybody here has been a player and a GM, except for the little guy, and I can't think of anybody better for him to learn from than you guys. So,
In a way.
oh, So everybody, have a great weekend. God bless, and we'll see you guys real soon.
See you guys later.
Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.
See you guys.